This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogmen, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, how's everybody doing? Good? Hold on. It's my headset that's... There we go. Hey, let's see if this will do it. Okay. Anyway, guys, everything is good over here. All right. Believe it or not, for once, remember I'm in northern Florida. I checked, and we're going to have our temperatures next week at night going into the 60s, which after going through a very hot summer is welcome news. But still in the daytime, it's still kind of hot. And just to keep up on my current complaints. You remember how I was saying back in August that they already had Halloween stuff? Today, I went to the stores, which shall remain unnamed, but usually when you see it in this store, it's the same thing. They already have Christmas stuff up. It's all right. And I know, today is October 1st, but I know they've had them from before. So basically, they've got Christmas decorations since September. And it's like, man, what happened? Part of the holidays was the anticipation of each holiday. All right. End of summer, or going back to school or whatever was Labor Day. Then, of course, the next buildup was Halloween, and then Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then New Year's. But, each thing had its own buildup. And that's really the good part of the holidays at the end of the year. And it was like, okay, enough of this. And when I say, I mean whole sections just for Christmas ornaments and things like that. And I get it. And that's another thing. How many times do you need Christmas ornaments? I bought some, and I store them away, but it's like, it kind of defeats the purpose of the anticipation, even though I'm an adult, of Christmas, holidays, whatever. So yeah, that's I'm going to get off my you've heard me complain about the thing with Halloween. Now it's the thing with Christmas. And they have, and by the way, what got me is that they have a little section off maybe for Thanksgiving, which is like, Thanksgiving is great. It's usually a 4-day holiday. But anyway, yeah, there you go. But, and then of course we'll be rolling around and moving to 2024. And then it's like, okay, here we go again. Something like that. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. Now that I'm off my soapbox. About who the guest is today at Stories of the Supernatural. This is the first time this gentleman has been here. His name is Ike Ensey. He is the founder of IDK Paranormal. He's a career law enforcement officer who began his career working in corrections. While in corrections, he attained the rank of lieutenant and became the special operations team commander for a 1,000-bed facility. He later joined the sheriff's department located where he lives and became a road patrol deputy, later being promoted to sergeant. After some years, he accepted a position with 7th Judicial Circuit District Attorney's Office of New Mexico as a senior investigator, where he spent approximately 6 years. He then accepted a position as lieutenant with Moriarty, New Mexico Police Department, where he later was promoted to captain, is currently the chief of police for the city. He will be retired. Well, I'm sorry, I take that back. I'm going to back up because he's going to be retiring in December 2019, which I take it, will clarify that he's already retired. During his time, he has witnessed many unusual events. As a child, he lived in a haunted 200-year-old farmhouse in Bavaria, Germany, and that helped fuel his interest in the paranormal. This interest continued as he lived in a haunted house in New Mexico and having strange experience as a logger working in the mountains of the Southwest. As a deputy sheriff, he was twice taken calls regarding animal mutilations and was ordered by higher authorities to not conduct further investigations into these calls, which he did anyway. Oh, we're definitely going to talk to him about that. During his career as a law enforcement officer, Ike has responded to calls regarding UFOs, tree people, disembodied voices at death scenes, satanic, pagan, and occult rituals, and reports of haunted places. Boy, do we got a lot to talk to him about. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today?
Hi. Hello from the high desert out here in New Mexico.
Good. I take it you're retired then by now, right?
I've been retired since 2000. Thank God.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was looking at, I don't know if that bio. Okay. But anyway, so here you are. You've done a lot of stuff in your career.
Yeah, it feels like it. I feel it.
Well, it makes for an interesting life, right?
It does.
But it sounds like in your bio that you've had experiences, since you were a kid? Is that correct?
Yeah, as long as I can remember, even when we were little kids living in Germany, in Bavaria, weird things would always happen. We lived in an old farmhouse, and even back then, weird things would happen.
Okay, and were you the only one that was witnessing it, or were your siblings or your other family members, or what went on?
The entire family, my three sisters, my mom, my dad, everybody knew. It's oddly enough over there, hauntings are pretty frequent and fairly accepted by everybody.
Really?
Yeah. I guess there's a reason all the fairy tales stem out of Bavaria, or most of them come out of Bavaria. Yeah, it's a very mystic place in sort of way.
Okay, so in other words, over there, it's not that like, oh, you saw ghosts, is like, what's wrong with you kind of thing?
No, it's just like, you too, huh? Who is he? That kind of thing. They accept it a lot more than they do here.
I see. Okay, so let me ask you, when you were, what was it that you saw? What happened when you were there in that house in Bavaria?
Well, there's probably too many things to mention, but we've had everything from doors opening and closing to disembodied voices. We'd hear them all the time. Just strange occurrences, like there's an echo all of a sudden. Are you hearing an echo when I'm talking?
Yeah, I know. There we go. All right, hold on. All right, there we go. Is it better now?
Okay. Yeah, much better. Yeah, there was all kinds of strange things that happened. I mean, we had a farm. My dad was American military, and he retired over there, and he liked it so much we stayed there. So we had a farm, and one night, our two horses and a donkey were inside the house in the kitchen, and their stalls were probably an acre away from the main house. Nobody could figure out how they got in because they're pretty wily horses. You wouldn't walk them.
Believe it or not, I'm like, did he just say livestock ended up in the house?
And ended up in the kitchen. And they trashed the kitchen. They were knocking over chairs. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and the racket woke us up, and we all run down to the house, see what's going on. And well, the animals are in the kitchen.
And I don't know, that must, how can you that's hard to explain, that, right? Because there's people that have experiences that are paranormal, but then they'll go on it could have been this or it could have been that. But I don't see how you could write that off as.
We couldn't explain it because you couldn't walk a horse. There's 2 doors they would have to go through to get into the kitchen. There was no way you could walk a horse through those doors. They were way too spooky and wily for that.
Oh man, I'm laughing because I can just imagine the face, especially of your parents. They must have been like, huh?
Yeah. We're all looking at each other like, all right, who's the practical joker? And it was wintertime too, and it's it gets really, really cold over there. It's comparable to Minnesota. There's snow on the ground pretty much 4 months out of the year, and nobody would get up.
I'm going to ask you something, and you tell me, since you told me, I'm just testing this. My other headset just went south on me, but I'm listening. It's instead of coming in through my ears, I'm hearing it on my regular speakers. But let me ask you, since it's an old farmhouse, I've heard that some of these farmhouses at some point they would keep the animals like on the first floor, of the house. Do you think that farmhouse ever had that setup?
The setup that I've seen in Germany and Bavaria is the barns are usually attached to the house, and it's not the first floor, just attached to the house. So you'd have a door. You'd have a door inside your house. You open it and step into the barn. And the reason they did that is to keep the animals warm.
Right.
But yeah, they weren't in the house. They were always in the barn part, but we never used that barn for that. My dad had a woodworking shop in there, and we built a whole separate horse barn. Like I said, probably we had like 60 acres over there. It was probably like 2 acres away from the main house is where the horse barn was with the stall and stuff, and that's where they stayed.
Okay, I'm like that's so. What did your it was just something that what just take them back to their stalls and
Yeah, yeah. We all got up as kids. This was back in the 70s, so it was fun. We were outdoor kids. We went down to the stall, got ropes and stuff, came back up to the house, put halters on them and walked them back out to where they belong. And um, it never happened again. It was a one-time deal, but there were so many things that happened in that house. It was a three-story house, and the,
okay.
the the second floor, as kids, we'd often have to use backup. I had three sisters, and we were afraid to go upstairs by yourself because you always felt like something was watching you uh, constantly, and pictures would fall off the wall. Um, just weird stuff. As little kids, you just knew something was wrong in that house.
That is, and how long did you guys live there?
Uh, well, I was 2 years old when we moved there, and I moved out when I was like 15 and a half. So we lived there
Oh,
quite a while, about 13 years or so.
that's a
And
long
it
time.
was a 300-year-old house, brick house with tile roof, the red tile roofs. All the houses look the same in Bavaria, all the farmhouses. They're massive places.
So you were there a long time.
Yeah.
That is incredible. I Let me tell you something. I've heard stories of people having, but that you just went to the top of my list of the inexplicable. I'm telling you right now. That right there is like so and that thing about being watched, did you guys ever sight anything, actually see anything like an apparition, or was it just that feeling and noises?
We've seen, shadow people quite often, long before the term shadow people was even something people talked about. I mean, nobody knew back then about shadow people, but you always seen, not always, but sometimes you'd seen a shadowy figure out of the corner of your eye in the house, and more often than not outside around on the property.
Interesting. Interesting. That is wow. So then fast so okay, so you had years of exposure. Sometimes
Yeah.
people have maybe even as a child they'll have a couple of experiences, and then so you come back to the United States, I take it, and then did you have any other experiences or
Well,
what happened?
to go back to Germany real quick, to the
Yeah.
exposure. Another reason I think we were so in tune is because my mom, she had a lot of friends that were. I was young. I'm not sure, but I'm sure they were practicing Wicca or
Okay.
something like that. Nothing evil, nothing black, but
Right, right.
it was not uncommon to see a Ouija board in our house, even though as kids we didn't really know what that was about.
Mhm.
But they were into that, and I think they may have invited some of that stuff into the house or brought some of that
Sure,
stuff into the house.
absolutely. That's what I have found, that people, whatever their intentions are, you can bring something through
Yeah,
that is not what you intended, or in other words, even just be how's that? You know how they say ignorance of the law doesn't give you an excuse? It's almost like the same thing.
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
even if you're fooling around with it and you don't, sometimes you could, instead of a sardine, you get you hook a great white kind of
Hmm.
deal. And
Yep.
yeah, I've heard that happening where people Ouija sessions turn ugly, and sometimes they doesn't happen till later on. But sure,
So
people
I would
when
say
you're trying to
be
with the
careful
spirit
what you
world.
wish for. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Um, in my experience, usually a discarnate spirit, which is usually the ones that you're going to bring up on a Ouija board, they're from the moment that they're earthbound, they're not the happiest souls. How's that?
Yeah.
So you could get a whole array of, and sometimes they just want to hang out because, hey, especially if there's somebody in that house who's sensitive and might be able to see them or hear them,
And
definitely they want to hang out.
those houses are just filled with history. I remember when we moved in, and I was probably 5 or 6 already back then. But like I said, it was 3 stories plus an attic, and up in the attic was just a huge amount of Nazi paraphernalia, like
Oh my
uniforms,
God.
gas masks. And my dad, he was a collector. He didn't personally collect it, but he had friends that collected that stuff, his army buddies.
Hmm.
So he sold all of it. But there was just like daggers, uniforms still on coat hangers wrapped in plastic and gas masks. So there's a lot of stuff that happened in that
But I
house,
take
I'm
it
sure.
probably when the family that lived there before, they, you know, they had to have either been the actual family, somewhere along the line if they had that much stuff,
Yeah, I'm
you
sure.
know.
There was even an old Nazi motorcycle leaning up against the barn when we moved there that my dad had sent to America and sold to one of his buddies over here.
I
And
bet. I bet. Stuff like that is like, and it goes to show you that sometimes, people, and you know what, to them maybe it was just stuff, that old stuff, not thinking that at some point it would be considered memorabilia that people would want to like
yeah,
get a hold of because they become so rare. Um but besides that, did you ever get like a bad feeling about the house, or was it just the regular stuff like, hey, something's watching me?
nothing felt malicious. We never felt
Right.
like we were in danger, but you could definitely feel something was there. I don't think it ever tried
Right.
to hurt us, but
Hmm.
you could feel the presence of something in the house for sure. And like I said, sometimes more outside than inside.
That's it, which makes you also think, maybe it was somebody that used to live there, a farmer. So that thing of bringing the animals into the kitchen,
Yeah,
it
that's
almost
weird.
sounds like, somebody that was worried about the animals. How how's that? you
And
know.
a lot of poltergeist activity too, and which is a German word in itself. And
Hmm.
bringing the horses in the house, that could be a poltergeist. That's mischievous. It could
Sure.
be funny in
But then
their
let me tell
minds.
you something. That's usually the poltergeist. How's this? That was an intelligent haunting. How's that? That was not
Yeah.
like what they call residual, where you just hear the
No,
sound here or a smell
no,
there, and it's like more a question of something, a repetition, versus
yes,
an actual, um,
intentional
you know,
acts. Yeah.
yeah. There's an intelligence there that it's like we're gonna bring. And you said it was in the winter, right? When they brought in the,
Mhm. Yeah,
let's say,
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
that's what makes me think that
Yeah, it
yeah,
could
that
have
was.
just been a farmer saying, I'm gonna bring these inside to keep them warm.
Yeah, and you guys don't leave them out.
Yeah, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I think that happens a lot, especially when there's people that live in some place for like 20, 30, 40 years, like basically their whole lifetime. And this is
And
not only where you live, it's where you work. Like if you're a farmer, it's not like
yeah,
somebody that lives here but they go somewhere else to work. Their whole life from sunup to sundown is in this place. This is their routine. And I think
yeah.
that sometimes that happens with a lot of these people that die, and it's like, you know what, this is not the greatest, but this is what I used to do all the time, you know?
You're the first person that's actually kind of thought of it that way. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never thought of it that way. It makes perfect sense because over there, the farmers really take care of their animals. They're very
Mhm.
compassionate with their animals. The cows usually wear bells.
Right.
They keep them warm in winter. I mean, they're animal friendly people. Yeah, that
Right,
even
right.
when
They care about
yeah,
the animal as in, yeah, that, and
yeah.
that they, to them, it's like
even
some people,
even
as
when
long
they
as the animal's not
slaughter,
freezing.
yeah, even when they slaughter animals like cows or pork, or they have little rituals, little sayings they say before they put the animal down. It's
Mhm.
very humane in a way.
Let me tell you that I think personally, I have chickens. I have a bunch of chickens.
Yeah, I love chickens.
And I'll tell you what, I could I don't I could never kill one of my animals and eat it.
No,
I'm
me
sh
either.
I'll tell you what, I'm sure that if I was ever driven to the point of hunger, I would. But that not being the case, you know, I could never. And you hear people like that, they would have the chickens and they would like grab it
Yeah,
and twist
yeah,
its
yeah,
neck and
yeah.
into the pot it goes. And I'm like, nah, see,
It's
call
hard
me
to
a
eat those.
hypocrite, whatever. I don't care. I could
And chickens are
never.
so smart. And
They
people that
are.
don't know chickens don't get it, but chickens are really smart.
Yes,
I
they
mean,
are.
they
Yes,
we've
they
had
are. They,
we've had
they
chickens and
recognize people. Somebody comes
yeah,
in, a
yeah,
stranger, and they get all like alarmed, like, I don't
yeah,
recognize this person. Everybody thinks that they don't. They do recognize people.
yeah. I could
Oh
swear they
yeah,
learned their names too. I mean, we
oh yeah.
chickens. All our chickens had names, and I could swear they knew their names. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, I have a
they're pretty
rooster. His
clever.
name is Blue, because he's a blue Andalusian. And I have another one that's blind. I call him Big Boy. And I'll be talking, but if I go, Big Boy, he'll just perk up because he knows I'm talking
Yeah,
about him. So I know what
yeah.
you mean. Yes,
And they
firsthand.
understand. They understand compassion and love. We used to, as kids, we
Mhm.
used to pick them up and hold them and pet them. and
Yeah.
they close their eyes and they fall asleep in your arms. I mean, they're,
Oh yeah, all the time. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, these
yeah, it's so
animals, they know what it's like not just to be handled, but be handled by somebody that cares. Like,
yeah.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. They and some of them when sometimes I'm late, I'm giving them their feed, even though I have plenty to eat, believe me, because mine are free range. They can forage
Okay.
here. They'll come up on my porch and be looking at me through the door, through the
Yeah,
glass door, like, hey. I'm like,
yeah.
you guys are so spoiled. I mean, usually there's enough food out there left over, plus they can forage. They've got plenty to eat, but they like it like when I feed them, even though it's one of those things that animals get used to seeing you as a food source. But besides that, yeah.
And besides that, I used to always tell people, chickens are so grateful. They leave you a protein package every day if you
Oh
take care of them.
yeah. Oh
You know,
yes. Yeah. And I mean, let
yeah.
me tell you, and I have some big roosters. I have big roosters. They don't ever give me grief. Ever. Ever.
Yeah, we've had
Ever.
some mean ones.
No, but see the thing is I've hand raised all my roosters.
That's
I've had
why.
them since chicks and I've hand raised them all. And
Wow.
even later on when they get big that some of them get now, everybody's good with me. And it's like I'll just let's veer off the paranormal. We're going to chicken. Hold on a minute. Every once in a while, I'll have some of these roosters because I can't get rid of them. They'll start fighting. I'll go, you guys, cut it out, and they stop and they look at me, you know, and everyone's
Yeah.
and sometimes they keep on, but then I'll hose at them. I'll put some water on them, or if not, they're like, okay, she's mad, and they just stop. Sometimes they get over. They get they're okay around each other, but for some reason, sometimes it's a younger rooster and older rooster. They get into a fight, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But savage. By the way, chicken world can be savage. Also, by the way, people
Oh
don't
yeah.
realize that. Chicken,
Oh yes.
chickens
They're
can be
little
really mean.
velociraptors.
Yes, they are. They are. They
Yeah.
are. I've seen them. If you take whether it's a hen or a rooster out of the flock for a while, and they don't recognize it when you put it back, they pick on it big time.
Oh, you take a mouse and throw it in your chicken coop and just see how vicious
Oh,
those chickens get.
oh yeah, no, anything around there. And I have also a flock of guineas. I got
Oh
about
yeah.
18 guineas. Oh man, they're great. Man, those things are fearless. They're
And
kind of
noisy.
I love it. That's why I like it. That's why I like them is they're great alarm dogs. Chickens, I
Hmm.
mean fowl or whatever you want to call them. But anyway, getting back to the paranormal. But yes, I understand that thing about, if somebody that this is their mentality and you just clarified that's the norm there for people that do farming, that even when they have to slaughter an animal, because let's face it, that is what farming is in most cases,
Yeah.
you know, where slaughter some of you send them off to be slaughtered or you slaughter them yourself. And yeah, so so when you came over to the because it's well, let me ask you something. When you stopped living there, was it to come to the United States or did you go somewhere else?
No, we came to the United States.
Okay.
We originally moved to Nashville, and we only stayed in Nashville for probably 4 months or so, and
Mhm.
then ended up moving to New Mexico. My dad had relatives out here, his sister and brother-in-law and stuff out here, so we moved out here.
Talk about a different setting from
It was
Bavaria.
it was a culture shock for me for sure. I mean, I had to finish high school in Las Lunas, New Mexico, and
Uh-huh.
that was definitely different.
I can imagine. I can imagine because you were what? You had basically almost gone through all your school age
Yeah.
in
And
Germany.
in Germany, school after ninth grade, you either automatically go to college or trade school. So ninth grade is like the senior year here.
Uh-huh.
So right after ninth grade, you go straight into college. So that it was right at my cutoff. So I came over here and I'm like, what? I got 3 more years of regular
Years.
school. No,
You were like,
this is
"What?
bullshit.
You gotta be kidding me." So let me ask, based on your bio, then what happened? You went into corrections?
Oh no, that came later. I mean, I I met my wife. We've been married since 1985.
Mhm.
But I met my wife and had kids, and so a lot of things, raising kids and stuff. So uh, I started out working for a garbage waste management, basically, and I didn't
Okay.
like that. And I got into logging, and I logged the mountains of New Mexico, which people that aren't familiar with the Southwest are saying, "Where in the heck do you log?" Uh,
Exactly. When I read that, I was like, I'm always thinking of logging as in the Northwest.
yeah, well, New Mexico has, it's probably 60% mountains, high
So much
mountains.
more.
we have huge altitude out here in big trees. So logging was prolific out here back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there was sawmills everywhere, huge trees. So yeah, I logged for 6 years, and it was a great job, which made you make a lot of money logging. But then that was about the era of the spotted owl and stuff, and sawmills started closing, and
It
logging
was
went out
the
of
what?
business.
The spotted owl?
Yeah, it started in the Northwest in Washington State and Oregon, where they said logging is interfering with the spotted owl nesting habitat, and that kind of gradually worked its way down here into this area, and logging became harder and harder. They just put more and more restrictions on it, and they started laying people off, and I could see the end of the line coming really quick. So my next step was I was a truck driver, already had a CDL, so I said, well, I'll try the cross country truck driving bit. And I did that for about 6 months. That was not for me, especially being fairly young and married and stuff. Every time you call
Yeah,
home, something's broke or something needs fixing. And here I am in New Jersey. That wasn't
right.
working at all. And I was getting really tired of being pulled over by the police a lot. I'm like, who are these guys? Always harassing me. I want to do that.
Yeah,
and
right. Wait a minute. I want to be the other end of this.
I want to harass these people. And the pathway for me was getting into corrections. I got into state corrections at first, and then private corrections. And I did that for 6 years and got as high as I could or wanted to get in corrections, because that's kind of a thankless job. I don't wish
Yes,
that on
I hear that a lot.
anybody. That is a thankless job. And it just so happens the county I was living in uh, got a huge grant, and they expanded the department by like 20 officers or deputies. And I
Hmm.
applied, passed all the background checks, physical, went to the state law enforcement academy, and that was it. Now I'm a deputy sheriff. And this county out here, it's huge. It's 5,000 square miles.
That's a
And
big.
oh
That's a
yeah,
lot.
New Mexico
All
counties are
right.
massive. And when you
And
only
how
have like
many
four,
officers do they got to cover that?
oh well, when I first started, there'd be one or two out at night, and there was no backup. And weird
That's
stuff would happen out here constantly, and you couldn't rely on state police to back you up, because they only had one or two or maybe three out
yeah.
in the area, and they'd usually be somewhere far away, so you couldn't count on those guys. And we
Right, right.
relied
As
more.
far as backup is like, yeah, they'll be there in 30 minutes or 45 minutes
Yeah,
or an hour or
yeah, even our own guys, you expected backup to be 30 minutes away no matter what happened.
right.
So
That was a given. And
you had to
this
be
was no,
really careful.
and this was not a two-man team kind of deal. You were always on your own.
You're a lone ranger. You carried everything you needed with
Wow.
you, and hope for the best.
Let me ask you, did you guys have any dead spots out there as far as radio reception?
Oh yes, oh
I
yes.
bet.
Constantly dead spots.
Yeah.
Just shabby radios, um,
Uh-huh.
where you couldn't get out on your radio, and you couldn't get out on a cell phone. Cell phones were still real in the early stages, so they were crap too. Yeah, so you had to take care of business. It was a pure survival. If
Right.
you want
That's
to make
what
it
to
home
me it
tonight,
sounds like you
be
had to make
smart.
sure you didn't end up in a
Yeah.
situation where like there's no cavalry coming.
No,
That's
no.
even if you could
Yeah.
raise somebody on the radio, it's like, yeah,
Yeah, it was always, if you're on one end of the county and the other officers on the other end of the county, running code, meaning going as fast as you can go, you're still looking at 45 minutes, 50 minutes before that person gets to you. And by then it's usually over.
yeah. I was gonna say. So what? How? And you did that. Well, let me ask you: being out there by yourself, what kind of experiences did you have?
Well, it really raises your, awareness of things, because you're by yourself and you have no backup. You're hyper vigilant,
Hmm.
and you just pay attention to everything. I mean, everything around you. And I think that's why I had so many experiences, because you just pay more attention to everything around. You don't just make a traffic stop and call it in and say, before you make the traffic stop, you're behind the car, you're looking around to see who else is around. Are there any lights nearby? Can I stop them underneath the light somewhere? So that
Hmm.
your mind is racing before you ever stop a car. So you're really, really
Right.
hyper vigilant. And I think that really helps, and that fuels, I think, your experiences, because everybody I
Sure.
think that I worked with has had paranormal experiences. Now, granted, the majority of them back then wouldn't talk about it.
Well, of course not. Yeah, talking about stuff like that back then was like a career killer, or you would be known as that guy. You know.
Absolutely, absolutely, because you have to take a psychiatric exam to
Hmm.
maintain your certification or keep your certification, and that was a death sentence. If a supervisor, if the sheriff or the chief said, "I'm going to send you for a repsych,"
Yeah.
and that's not a good thing. you know?
Right.
So
No.
you
No.
you better keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, it absolutely. I've heard that very a lot of times, and people saying, "Yeah, maybe you would say it to a couple of your friends that you were close to, but
Yeah,
that's as far as it went."
yeah.
You know,
And then
and
then you also
supervisors
had
didn't even want to hear it either.
yeah. And then you had your some deputies and some officers were very religious, and they'd rather not know, even though it happened to them.
Yeah.
They choose to ignore it. They're like, I don't want to hear about it. Don't tell me about it. Whatever happened is I don't want to know. That was their attitude. That's how they dealt with it. I was
And
much too
what
curious
what
for that.
what were some of the experiences you had as
Oh,
far as that
it's
you think back?
too many to even
Let me
But
tell you something. I'm hoping you're going to tell me something that's going to beat the livestock in the kitchen story. To me, that's the
I didn't
that
think
is
that was
like
that good of a
number
story.
one. That is the best.
The
Um,
one story that scared me the most, and it
uh-huh.
almost changed my mind into messing around with the paranormal, is the sheriff's department in Estancia, New Mexico, where I worked. It's a small
Right.
little western town, and a lot of things have happened in that sheriff's department. The last three hangings in the state happened in that sheriff's department. They were indoor hangings, and
Uh,
it's the building. The original building had burned down, and then in the 50s or 60s, they built a new building on the same site. And it was, like I said, it was built in the 60s, but it was kind of like a maze, tiny little hallways, old jail cells with big, heavy, clunky steel doors, big, giant Folger keys to open those doors. It was just a mess. The whole sheriff's department was leaking asbestos from the roof. It was just
oh,
a mess. The whole building was just crap. But I was probably a deputy sheriff for less than a year, and there was a female deputy that was working that night, and it was kind of a slow night. So she said she was going to go to the sheriff's department to do some reports. And while she was there, I would stay out, and take calls close by. So she goes in to do reports, and I'm parked outside. And she's there less than 15 minutes, and she comes driving up to me really fast, which I found unusual because usually when you leave the sheriff's department, you get on the radio and you clear with dispatch saying, I'm
mhm,
leaving the sheriff's department. I'm back in my car. So they always need to know where you're at. She didn't
right.
do any of that. I thought she was still doing reports when she pulls up to me and she's pale and she's shaking and she goes, this effing place is freaking haunted. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she goes, there's shit going on in that building. Part of my cussing. There's stuff happening in there that I can't explain. And I'm like, well, what happened? And she goes, well, I'm in here doing my report when the lights started going on and off, not all the way off. She goes just surging. And she goes, then the cell door started slamming. She was so scared she left everything behind, her walkie-talkie, her box, her paperwork, everything she left behind. And she's like begging me to go back in there with her to get her stuff. And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I'll go in there with you. And we go back in there and collect all this stuff. And it was just ice cold in there. You could feel something's not right. And you always felt it in that building. And it progressively got worse. I've had everything from, because I used to have to go in there by myself and do reports. I didn't let it scare me until it got to a certain point one night. But sometimes the faucets would turn on in the bathroom.
Okay.
Cell door would open and close by itself. We'd always kept them closed because if they're open, they were blocking the hallway. The cell doors were big enough and the
Okay.
hallway was narrow enough. If the cell door was open, it would block the hallway. So you'd always close the
Uh-huh.
cell door. I'd walk in, I'd do a report, I'd walk out, two cell doors would be open, blocking the hallway. I'm like, this ain't right. And this happened a lot. Constant knocking, constant voices. You couldn't understand what the voices were saying, but you would hear something. You'd be doing a report, you're sitting there typing on your computer, and it'd be like somebody in your ear saying something to you. And you like turn and look and like there was nothing there, but you heard something. And this happened continuously probably for a year. And we finally
Uh-huh.
hired another guy who was into the paranormal like me. And
Okay.
I was already promoted to sergeant. I started telling him these stories. He goes, well, we need to Ghostbust that place. And
Uh-huh.
that's when, this kind of before Ghostbusting became popular on TV. I think Ghost Hunters were the only ones out. But we
Okay.
started putting recorders in the cells and we'd leave. And we'd be only two out at night. And we would leave for a couple of hours, take care of business, come back, play the recorders, pick up the recorders and play it back. And there'd be weird stuff happening. There'd be mumbling sounds or knocking sounds. A lot of times it was just knocking, always in threes, knock, 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 knock.
Okay.
And we try to replicate it. We'd go to the back door, the front door, knock on the doors, knock on the cells, knock on the wall to see if we can replicate that sound. And nothing we did ever sounded like it. So we'd start doing research, and we found out that in the early 70s, a fellow named Faustine Romero, he was from a neighboring town. There's probably, I think, 8 municipalities or little towns in this county. And this was one of the neighboring municipalities. Faustine Romero was a young Hispanic guy who they arrested back then and put in a drunk tank. He was, they arrested him for disorderly conduct. He was drunk. And back then, the drunk tank was a little bit bigger cell than the average cell. And there was 2 or 3 other guys in there already. And Faustine told the deputies, don't put me in there. I don't like these guys and they don't like me. And cops were a different breed back then. They just, shut up, get in there. They shoved him in there and didn't check on him. And when they checked on him later on, the guy was beat to death. He got killed inside those cells. So we always assumed it was Faustine Romero that was haunting the place. Probably wrong. But, we just thought, Faustine is the one who's doing all this crazy stuff to us. So one evening, we're in there by ourselves, and the place has a particularly spooky feeling to it. And we decide to leave. And we're about 20 miles away from the sheriff's department already when this fella I was working with, ghostbusting with, says, I forgot to turn in my timesheet. It was a Thursday or Friday, whenever we turned in our timesheets. Me being a sergeant, so it's my responsibility to make sure timesheets are turned in. I'm like, you did this on purpose, didn't you? He goes, no, really, honestly, Sarge. I'm like, God, I don't want to go back and have to go in there. And he goes, well, I'll. He got off an hour earlier than me, and it was 2:00. I got off at 3:00, so it was just before 2. So he didn't have time to drive back, and I was going to make him drive back, but I said, just go to your house and stay in your unit, listen to the radio while I go turn your timesheet in, just in case something happens. He goes, I'll do that, Sarge. And I drive back down there, and the whole time I got this feeling like something is not right. And I pull up to the back door where the deputies usually enter, and literally my skin is crawling. I just know something's not right. And my sixth sense kicked in. I was like, I'm not going to go through this door. And since I was a sergeant, I had a key to the front door of the building, the administrative entrance, So I'm like, I'm going to go through the admin side because something's not right. I'm not going to walk through this maze where all the cells are at. So I drive to the front door, and I still have this crazy feeling, and it has these double glass doors where the public enters. And so I park my unit right in front of the doors, shine the bright lights in there, including my spotlight, and just light up the whole hallway and everything else. And I unlock the door and I walk in, and it's just mind-boggling how nervous I am. I don't understand why. And I'm about halfway to the administrator's building where I drop off the timesheet on this long hallway when a cell door slams. And it literally slammed. It slammed hard. I mean, it echoed through the entire building. Like I said, these are heavy steel doors, and it just, bam, it slammed. And it startled me so bad that I almost blacked out. Next thing I know, I'm on my knees, and I got my gun drawn.
And you're like,
and I'm like hyperventilating. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? Luckily I'm about 10 steps away from the door. I slide his timesheet underneath the door, and I'm walking out backwards with my gun. And I get back in my unit, and I tell this guy who was waiting for me to respond when I cleared. I said, dude, I'll never do that again. Something happened.
I was going to tell you, better not forget your timesheet again.
But that just fueled him. He got more excited. He goes, oh, we need to look what's doing this. So probably a week later, we were back at the station together doing reports and stuff. And he goes, let's turn the lights off and see what happens in here. So we turn all the lights off, have the recorders going. Nothing really happened except for it was really spooky feeling. So we turn the lights back on, and we start taunting Romero. I start calling him all kinds of names. I'm like, Faustine, you big pussy, show yourself. No wonder you got your ass kicked. No wonder you're dead. Can't even stand up for yourself. I was being a total jerk. By the way, I don't do that anymore. I haven't done that since because of this incident. I was really, really taunting him. And nothing happened. You could tell something was not happy with us, but nothing happened. So that night, I go home, and the following morning, I'm sick. I wake up, I have a fever. I get home at 3 in the morning. I wake up like 10 o'clock in the morning. I have a fever. I feel really achy, and my throat's swollen up. I'm like, oh God, what's this? Well, it turns out it was strep. So it's so bad. My fever's so high. My wife takes me to the doctor. They give me antibiotics. I come back home. Nothing's working. It's getting worse. Go back to the doctor the next night. They give me a steroid injection, which worked. And the steroid injection worked great. My throat opened up because I could barely breathe anymore. They were going to admit me into the hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm not for that. But so they gave me the steroid. They sent me home. And I started feeling better. The fever started going away. My throat's opening up. And I'm like so relieved. This is like 3 days have gone by. And I'm in my bedroom. I'm on my bed. It's probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm watching, I think, MASH on TV. And I'm drinking a Gatorade. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but I see myself in the jail cells at the sheriff's department. I'm standing in the jail cell. Everything is bright blue, like a blue light, neon blue light. And I'm just standing there looking around, and this voice tells tells me, "Keep fucking with me, and I'll show you what I can do." And I snap out of it. And my
Yeah.
wife walks in and she goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Did I just fall asleep?" And she goes, "No, you're just staring at the TV." At the same time, my dog Scooby, an Australian Shepherd, he's in the living room and
Uh-huh.
he has a seizure. And it was Christmas, just before Christmas, we had a Christmas tree up. He has a seizure, which he's never had before, and collapses and knocks over the Christmas tree. So while my wife is asking me if I'm okay, she hears the tree fall over. So she goes over and she goes, "Oh my God, something's wrong with Scooby. Come here quick." And I'm like, "I don't even think I can move." She goes, "Well, he's getting back up." And I said, "Well, fill up a dish of water and make sure you get some water." Well, I hear her filling up the dish of water when Scooby comes walking in. He stops right next to the bed and just stares at me like he's never done before. He's just staring at me.
Right.
And I'm petting him on the head. I'm like, "Are you all right, Scooby?" He's just looking at me like as perplexed as I was with my
It's like, this
little
is
vision.
all your fault.
And this, I've only just probably been 3 times in my life where I've had a dream, if that was a dream, that was as clear as that. I mean, oh, what happened? I'm back.
So, yeah. So at this point, you're thinking, okay, I confirmed who this is.
Well, after this was all over, I called my buddy up and I said, "We need to lay off the sheriff's department. We need to lay off in Faustine for a while because I really think he came to see me.
Uh-huh.
I'm not the kind of person that gets that sick. I've never been admitted into a hospital or ever even been really sick.
Right.
This was bad, and the vision I had was so clear. I took it as a message, because we were so rude with him, because I was so obnoxious with him. I took it as a message, and believe it or not, after that, the sheriff's department had kind of a peaceful feeling for just a little while, maybe 2 weeks. You could feel it. You could walk in and we'd say it to each other like, "This place feels different, like something happened." And then after about 2 weeks, it started back up. Even though we didn't do anything, we didn't talk to it
Mm-hmm.
anymore, we didn't taunt it anymore. It all started coming back. Doors started opening, knocking sounds started happening again. So whatever it was back to its old tricks.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, she just retired, and she worked long years and years, very small department within Miami, like small. And they had, small station. As a matter of fact, they only had one holding cell in the back. The department, I want to say they built like the 1940s. And it got so bad that they would hear, it's really funny, that same thing of the the cell door opening and closing. And they only have one cell, and it's in an unmistakable sound. You couldn't think
Yeah.
it's that. And she said normally you would hear it more often after hours when everybody's gone and they only had a skeleton. I mean, they didn't have a big department, a lot of officers to start with. And they also had sightings of, like, if you were going down the hallway and you had offices seeing like a figure like going around the corner, like down into another hallway. And I remember she told me one time that one of the dispatchers one time got so spooked that she got a handheld and she sat outside the office because it was one of those things where she was the only one in the room, in the building, and she got so spooked that she just sat outside, and was just, they didn't have that much traffic, on the
Same
on the
same thing.
handheld.
Same things happened here. That used to be the old dispatch center used to be part of the sheriff's department before I started, and they
Uh-huh.
had experiences back then. And actually, it's funny you would mention that story because that's the exact same thing that happened here. One of the dispatchers was so scared one night, she went outside and sat in the car with a handheld, and
Yes.
she got on the phone and called somebody else to come down to, spend the night with her there. She wasn't gonna be in there by herself anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it was one of those. What saved this, was that because it wasn't like where you're talking about such a large area to cover, that the few officers that there were at night, could check on her.
Yeah,
But she
yeah.
was like, "No, I'm not gonna go. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna sit in there by myself." And they
Yeah.
never and I remember asking her, I said, "Did anybody ever, like, no?" She says, "We never had any nobody die on us, like natural or otherwise. There was only one motorcycle cop that died in an accident, like in the 1950s, but that was it. There was no other suspects,
Hmm.
all right, that they could say, well, it might be like what you just described about that prisoner that ended up getting killed. So it was always a big mystery. I mean, it could have been an officer. It didn't have to have died tragically, but you know, but
Well,
never. But yeah. And a
we've had
lot of
quite a few
people,
officers back.
yeah, a lot of people, if they didn't have, they would. They would get that weird feeling like you were talking about, or they would think that somebody had just passed by and they would come to their office and look. There's nobody in
Hmm.
the hallway, that kind of deal.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That
So
was
yeah,
a
that
daily occurrence.
people don't realize that sometimes, yeah, things like that. But that thing that happened to you with a strep throat, I'm gonna tell real quick my own story. I went to St. Augustine. This was a few years back, and part of St. Augustine, they have the original cemetery for St. Augustine, which is Tolomato. And Tolomato Cemetery, when it was established, it was like on the outskirts of St. Augustine, where they would bury people like away from the actual. But I obviously, by the time I went, it was in the middle of St. Augustine. Bottom line, I remember going there and I didn't do anything stupid. I didn't do any provocation, but I took all these pictures and the next day. And by the way, I was on vacation. I was having a great time. I wasn't feeling ill. How's that? And I went there when it was getting dark and I took some pictures and things like that. The next day, I was so sick. I mean, sick as in like I couldn't lift my head off the pillow. Sick as that I had to end up going back home and I couldn't. And later on, I mean, like sick, like fever, you name it. I was like, oh, I was feeling horrible. And later on, I was like, man, could it be? Is it coincidental? Later on, I found out that a couple of times they had what they called fever epidemics out in
Hmm.
St. Augustine. And at that time, this was the burial ground for them. And I was like, man, I hate to
There
think
you
that I got
go.
like a backlash from hanging out
Hmm.
there because it was like I
Hmm.
went from feeling great till it was like, oh my. And by the way, I want to say that I was sick for like a month. It took me like a month
Wow.
at least to recover. It was a slow recovery. It wasn't like, oh, I feel really bad. And then 2 or 3 days later, it was, and I never really got an answer why, or what got me sick that way. But yeah, I understand sometimes people don't realize that when you go to certain places, there's
I
something
think
about it.
I think your body has a built-in defense mechanism for that. And as much
Yes.
ghost hunting and stuff that I've used to do, I've kind of slowed down some. But you see it on these ghost hunting shows all the time. I don't feel good. I'm getting dizzy. I'm getting sick. That's never ever happened to me, except
Yeah.
for 3 days ago. 3 days ago, I'm in northern New Mexico with my wife, and we're up there. The colors, the trees are all changing. It's real pretty up there. And I find an old graveyard, an old cemetery. I'm like, oh heck yeah! So
Yeah.
you gotta go visit the old cemetery. And there's probably maybe 50 graves in there, and some of them dating back to the Civil War. There's some Confederates
Okay.
buried in there. So I'm walking around. I got my phone recorder on. I'm trying to do some EVPs, and all of a sudden I get nauseous. I'm really to the point where I almost throw up, and I hate puking. I'm not a puker.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't puke. Uh, to the point where I almost start feeling like I got to vomit. And I'm like, okay, this is enough of that. You guys can't come with me. You need to stay here. This is your resting spot. And I'm on my motorcycle, and I get back on my bike and I leave. And as soon as I get back to our RV camp spot, I start feeling better. You know,
Right.
that's
What
the
a coincidence,
first
huh?
time. That's the first time that's ever happened to me. I don't understand. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but that was weird.
Yeah, you could, but and that's the thing. Like you said, I leave the area and all of a sudden I feel great. I mean, I don't feel sick.
Yeah.
It's really funny because I've had a, Sedona, Arizona is known
Oh
for
yeah.
being the house. What's the word? The new age, the place to feel wonderful. I've
Yeah. It's
had
on a
two
ley
different
line and all that. Yeah.
persons tell me, people that don't know each other, tell me that as soon as they crossed into what's considered Sedona, they got really sick, like
Really?
sick. And then when they left, it stopped. Two different
Hmm.
persons, two different men, as a matter of fact. And I was like,
Hmm.
and then I'm thinking to myself, like everything, like a lot of these places where people congregate that are supposed to be, I don't know what I want to call it, enlightened, or
Yeah.
the only thing I
Yeah.
can think of is that you always get people pretending to be enlightened that are anything but.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you get some of that energy mixed up.
Yeah. I
But yeah, people
agree with that.
told me the same thing.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And there are certain
And
areas, especially like here in New Mexico, also that are just more mystical or more energy than other places. And they call it the land of enchantment for a reason, I guess, because there's so much diversity out here. Everything from the old Spanish influence, to witchcraft, Mexican and the Aztec influence out here, and then the
Right.
European influence. There's so much going on, and Native American influence out here in general. Uh, there's areas there's a place north of where I am, probably about 30 miles north, and it's gold mining area, and I used to have a gold claim
Mhm.
out there, and you could just feel the energy. It's a lot of quartz, a lot of minerals in the ground, so it's just a natural
Okay.
battery. And I've got some of the best EVPs I've ever gotten out there in that area. It's just
I
amazing. There's a
bet.
little town called Golden, New Mexico, and at one point there was probably 5,000 people living there, and now there's maybe 15. And they used to have brothels and not casinos, saloons and all that stuff. So it was a huge gold mining town at one point, and there you could see the remnants of it. There's just ruins of buildings and stuff everywhere, and it's a mountainous region, and you really need a four-wheel drive to get up into those mines. But we've caught some crazy EVPs. I caught one. It's a female that says that that's what I understand she says, and my daughter understands, and most people that I have listened to hear that. She says, "Help, kill me." Uh,
Wow.
and I've gone back to that same spot probably 10 times trying to catch more EVPs. Never
Yeah,
happened
because people
again.
don't realize that a lot of these mining towns, they would basically they would come alive overnight as soon as the word got out that there was something discovered. And it wasn't just the miners, because you would have all this industry, like people selling goods, the
Yeah,
brothels, anything to cater to these miners. But at the same time, you had a lot of unsavory people running around, and you would hear a lot of people getting killed so that they could, if word got out that you had discovered something,
yeah.
you know.
Lawlessness. There's a lot of lawlessness and a lot of
Yes.
money. These people are
Oh
mining
yeah.
gold, so the gold is there. Uh, the EVP I caught, we were just going hiking, and I wasn't even intending to do any EVPs, but I was going to document our hike, and I had a DVR camera with me, and I was trying to turn it on, and it wouldn't turn on, and I had my phone recorder, and I always turn my phone recorder on when I'm up in those areas because of EVPs. So I guess maybe I was just in case. But my phone was in my pocket, and the recorder was running, but the camcorder wouldn't start up before we started our hike. And my daughter says, "Did you change out the battery or something like that?" And I'm like, "It was fully charged when I left the house, and it's still charged. It just won't start." And there's a moment of silence, and then there's a totally different female's voice, different inflection, different tone, completely different. It says, "Help," waits like a second or two, "Kill me." It was mind-boggling. I still have this EVP. It is mind-boggling that happened. I didn't realize I had it until like 2 days later when I was like, "Oh, I got to check my recording." And like I said, I went back like 10 times to that place and never got it again. But we got
You know
tons of
what? In a lot of
these.
these mining towns, men outnumbered women a lot. So they would
Absolutely.
have a lot of these. The reason why is I know because I wrote a book about it. They would have how can I tell you, people that would some of these miners, they would become obsessed with some of the
Mhm.
prostitutes. Like they were one of these murder suicides that was very common
Yep.
out there when they didn't want to have, because they were like, because there was such a differentiate, as far as a lot of men, very few women.
Yep.
And that's why basically they could go out there, even what they had, what they call dance hall girls,
Yeah.
which is all they would do is just dance. They weren't really prostituting themselves as far as, but they would make so much money just being dance hall girls because there was such a difference as far
Yeah.
as men to women. But a
It
lot of
was
stuff
it's
went out
it's
there.
it's the perfect storm. I mean, you have outlaws, you have miners, you have call girls, you have Asians. We had a huge Asian mining population out here who were treated worse probably than any
Mhm.
human in the world at the time.
Right,
Asians, the Chinese, they couldn't even file a complaint against a white
right,
person if they were attacked. They weren't allowed to be buried near any white people or
right. Yes,
non-Chinese people. They were treated horrible, and there's several instances out there where Chinese miners got killed. There's one, I want to say 15 Chinese miners got killed in a collapse out in these mountains north of me somewhere. So there's the history out there is just mind-boggling. It's a fascinating
right.
area,
That
but
they the thing is that, yeah, they were even, as far as the town, their community was segregated. They had their own area
yeah,
in these towns and stuff like that. And yeah, the people. I mean, how's this? You sometimes see these Hollywood versions. of the old west, and they kind of romanticize it a little bit,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot. How's that? When in reality, life was very, very difficult and rough out there, and life was cheap. How's that?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And when I first bought my claim out there, um, you could always feel, once again, there's always something watching you. And I'd be out there working the claim by myself, and I had a German Shepherd out there with me, a big old female, and
Mhm.
she would sit near me, and all of a sudden she would just stare off at something. I'm like, "What are you looking at?" And she just something. This is daytime, you could,
Right.
it didn't matter. I wouldn't even want to be out there at night. It was bad enough at daytime to be out there by yourself. It was just, you could feel it in the air. You knew something was out there. I don't know if it was out to
Uh-huh.
harm you, if it was malicious or not, but definitely something's out there. I took Larry Lawson. I think you're familiar with Larry Lawson. You may have had on your show, I
Yeah.
think. He came out to visit me last year or year before last, and I took him out to his mining country, and he was just blown away. He was like, "Oh my God, what is going on
Yeah.
out here? This is a pretty crazy area."
No, can you imagine? And also, you mentioned something about animal mutilations.
Hmm.
Are we talking here UFOs, or are we talking here
Now,
ritual sacrifice? Oh, don't tell me I
different
lost
kinds.
him.
Are you back?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. I don't know what happened. Yeah, we've had several. There's different kinds of animal mutilations. We have cattle mutilations, which is all the rage, and
Yeah.
other animal sacrifices. We've had
Yes.
satanic cults were a popular thing in the '90s and early 2000s around here.
Yeah.
They may still be. I don't know because I'm out of the loop.
Yeah, they are. They are. They just keep it. And the truth is, I think a lot of times people don't realize, how there's the stuff that everybody recognizes, but sometimes there's stuff that's more subtle that if people don't know what they're looking for at the site, they don't recognize the symbology that they leave behind.
Now,
But anyway, keep going.
you seem to know a lot about that. So let me ask you. Maybe you know. We
Hmm.
came across as deputies a lot of times where they planted dead trees, like stick trees, real tall, and tied colored ribbons on there, like orange, red, blue, green. There'd just be a bunch of ribbons flowing on a like a dead tree, sometimes in a circle, sometimes just randomly. But wherever
Hmm.
you found those, eventually you would find that there was some kind of activity there. You'd find a rock pentagram on the ground,
Yeah.
or a dead goat. Beheaded goat was a common thing.
Yes.
Beheaded sheep was a common thing, and cats, a lot of dead cats.
Yeah. And that, by the way, that's dark. That's dark magic. Okay, that's dark magic. There's even and see, there's a crossover because, for example, there's Afro-Caribbean from the diaspora that
Hmm.
went to like the islands and down into Brazil, and then you get what they call brujeria that's out of Mexico. Not all, but some of the Santa Muerte is tied into
Hmm.
that. All of those, at some point, it's what they call blood rituals. Okay, that you have to feed whatever it is with blood. Sometimes it's alcohol or tobacco, but when you start seeing blood, and there's even one where prior to, let's say, killing a goat, they'll kiss it and hug it, almost to make it as like if you were treating a human, which is almost like how's this the substitute for a human, because of course the ultimate sacrifice is a human.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right. So yes, you do see a lot of that wherever you see um that. Definitely it's dark magic. And
Now,
how's this because you see a lot tied into the drug cartels or drug running, where rituals are done to protect them. you know Normally it's not just for, or there's something that's done for that. All
yeah,
right.
we've seen that
So
a lot with Santa Muerta and all that, with the cartels.
yes.
Most of the satanic places we found predominantly were Caucasians.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Well.
we have a huge mountain that runs right through the center of our county. It's tail end of the
Mhm.
Rocky Mountains, and along the edge of the mountains at the bottom are land grants, Spanish land grants that have been around since the
Mhm.
1600s. And a lot of the people there are semi-lawless. They still think this is part of Spain, and they're very rude or non-accepting for any kind of law enforcement. It's a lawless area, but we'd have to respond to those areas all the time. And I have a lot
Okay.
of have friends that live in that grew up in those communities. And brujeria is a real thing that's still practiced today.
Yes.
That there's just they have rituals that are half Catholic because they're all Catholics.
Oh, right,
But then,
right, right. They do
oh,
that.
yeah,
And what's really funny is that some of these people, you'll see them going to a Catholic church,
absolutely,
and but at
absolutely.
the same time, they're killing animals, cats, animals. You have to
Yeah,
understand that sometimes it's not just the bloodletting; it's the suffering of the animal. By the way, which is part of the ritual. In other words, the suffering augments the magic that they're trying to work.
yeah.
All right. Um, uh, and for example, like in some here, if it's if it's a four-legged animal, only a man can kill it. If it's two-legged, like a chicken or bird, a woman can.
Hmm.
All right. A lot of times they also do that. Uh, Usually, if somebody's either cursed, they're trying to take off a
Hmm.
curse,
Hmm.
or sometimes even a cleansing if somebody's got some very bad disease, something along those lines. Sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's cursing, and sometimes it's cleansing, usually of something. I don't know. Out there, do you ever come across people leaving stuff on railroad tracks, like ritual items? Usually, you might not know it unless
I,
it's in a bag.
I haven't seen that, but I've seen some voodoo type activity in the town I was investigating. And the reason I know this is because I sent it to the labs up in Santa Fe, which are state labs. But the town, there's a group of people that work for the county, not the county, the city management system where they do the road work and all that stuff. The road department, city road department is what I'm trying to say. And predominantly Hispanic, maybe two white guys that work for the road department, and it ended up with a big feud. And basically, what they were doing is they were stealing everything that wasn't tied down and using it for their own. And I was investigating when I was with the DA's office, and one of the guys, one of the white guys, came to me and did a complete affidavit and what he knows and what's missing. Well, they sent him out to one of the wells to check the meter, and on the door of the well house is a cow tongue
Oh,
in a
mhm,
velvet bag that's nailed to the door, and it
mhm.
was meant for him because they sent him out there, and it's I've never heard of such thing. I mean, that's something they don't do out here.
Yeah.
So what they told me from the labs that traces probably back from your neck of the woods, or Louisiana, and the cow tongue symbolizes, keep your mouth shut.
Your mouth shut. Exactly.
And
Yeah,
that's
it is.
basically what that was all about.
Yeah. It's like what was it? That with it, sleep with a fish. It's like the same thing. It's
Yeah,
the symbology is you know, like
yeah.
tongue as in talking, that kind of deal. That's very common as far as, and I've heard of that being found, places where they have the altars and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That you'll find all this paraphernalia and all these different things
We've come across
there.
those more
One
than once.
time, and I was in Miami. I'm in North Florida now, but I was born and raised in Miami. And I remember one time, my office, it was like almost on the corner. It faced inward, but if you came out the back of the building, you could see the corner. It was a four-way street, and you had where people have the crosswalk. And I remember I go out to the back because I'm talking on my phone, obviously something I didn't want anybody in my office over here. And I'm there, and I see what looks like an overstuffed backpack on the corner
Mhm.
on the sidewalk. And this is a very and it's like, that's weird because you're familiar. And I'm looking, and it's at the corner, and the sidewalk slopes down from there. And I'm looking, I'm like, you know what? What is that dark liquid that's running down the sidewalk from it? So I got out, I went around, and I walked over and I said, "Oh, that's blood." And this thing was
Oh, great,
bulging. So
great.
I go back, I
Hmm.
called a police officer, and he comes and he talks to me first. And I said, "Look," and you can tell he's looking at me like, and he should know better. You can tell it's like, man, this is the kind of call I hate. And I said, "Let's go look." And he went over there, and I remember he like pushed it with his foot, with his boot, and more blood, like, whoosh. And the concern was, of course, that it was, he called in other officers, And when they opened it up, it was full stuffed with dismembered chickens.
Oh,
I
great.
mean, a lot. And it was fresh, obviously. And the idea was that people don't realize that at Crossroads is basically you do it if they were used to cleanse somebody or take something so that this thing cannot find its way back to the point of
Hmm.
origin. That's why they leave it at these four ways. And I could
Wow.
tell that poor guy when he pushed that, you could tell his face was like, why me? Why do I don't want to be cursed? I don't want to open this thing. But of course, the
Hmm.
concern was that it was a human, it wasn't
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
animal. But
Wow.
yeah, that happens. I understand exactly what you mean as far as you know, things like that. Sometimes, like you said, they're out in the wilderness. But I will tell you, you always hear of out in the woods them finding sacrificed animals, horses, like you said, livestock. And this is the thing also when you said that thing about the cattle mutilation. I know that not too long ago they had found some cattle mutilated out in Texas along this highway. I can't remember what, but the highway goes through, I guess, more than one county. And I believe it used to be the old Spanish Trail, something like that. And they still haven't
That's
figured it out. Of course, they're um, all these different spots that, from what I was reading, these are the parts of the cattle that are the least valuable, which are like the udders and the tongue and
yeah.
you know, if you're going to butcher an animal.
It's very
And
perplexing.
what have
There's
you? Well, out there you might have more of it than over here.
well, most of like the satanic stuff you can explain to some degree, but cow mutilations make no
Hmm.
sense at all.
No.
Absolutely no sense at all, and it's been going on for so long. And
Hmm.
the first cow mutilation I had was just up here by Moriarty, out on the outskirts of Moriarty, and somebody had called in a dead cow, a dead bovine, which is not usually a call we take, but we thought a car may have hit it and it drug itself off the road. And
Okay.
it's just a little 2-lane road that's like a little spur road and not a whole lot of traffic. And my instinct was, look for a car with bumper missing or something down the road.
Right.
I assumed the drunk guy hit it and didn't want to get caught by the cops and tried to limp his car back home. That's the kind of thing I was thinking.
Right.
How wrong was I? I get there and it's nighttime. Of course, I work nights and I spotlight the cow and I got my flashlight. I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, oh, this doesn't look right at all. First of all, it's still warm, so it
Wow.
hasn't been dead too long, unless it's
Hmm.
but one ear was missing, one eye was missing, the tongue was missing, and the tongue was cut off way back in the throat, straight across.
Right.
Uh, its its anus was cored out, like took a cord, just pulled the whole thing out. It was just a
Uh-huh.
blank hole back there, and its scrotum was missing, and it was cut out like an infinity sign, almost like like an 8. Uh,
Yes.
and it was a perfect cut. There was no jagged edges. It was just like somebody did it with a scalpel and just cut it out. And there's no blood. There's absolutely no blood anywhere. And I'm like, being into the paranormal, even back then, I've heard of cow mutilations. I'm not stupid. So I'm thinking, I think I got to mutilate a cow here. Just took a bunch of pictures, got a hold of the farmer who owns the cow. The cow did escape from the fence, but he was he couldn't explain what happened to the cow either. He was as perplexed as me. He was like, why in the hell would anybody do that to one cow?
Right.
We couldn't tell, it wasn't shot. We don't really know what killed this cow. It didn't look like it was hit by a car, and it certainly wasn't shot because the farmer showed up with a backhoe, a tractor, because he said he was going to remove it from the road because he didn't want to have to pay somebody else to do it. So I waited around. He shows up at the tractor because I wanted to see the cow rolled over, flipped over to see what's going on the other side, to see if there's any exit wounds or bullet holes or anything like that. I have no idea what killed this cow. So that piqued my interest. And then probably about 8 months later, 8, 9 months later, there was a female officer that worked in a town called Mount Mare, which is south of, it's still in our county, but it was in the far southern end of the county. And she called me up. She was a city cop and I'm a county cop. So she calls me up because she has something going on in the county and she wants to tell me about it. So I drive down there and I meet her and she's got her boyfriend there. And her boyfriend is a ranch hand. He works on the ranch. And I can't remember what his name is, but she goes, "Hey, tell the sergeant what you've seen." And he goes,
Let's back up to what you were talking about. Ike, as far as the that that cow that you found out there, that that we were talking about the mutilation,
Hmm.
that
So
even
I
the
think
farmer couldn't or well, the owner couldn't figure out why did they do that or who did that.
right. So as I was saying, I got a call from an officer in the neighboring town, and I went down to see her, and her boyfriend was there, and he's a ranch hand, and he goes, I understand you're interested in mutilations. He goes, I can show you some weird shit. I just come across it earlier. I'm like, by all means, let's go. And I called my buddy up, the other deputy, and I said, we got to go look at this. So he takes us out into the desert, and it's quite a stretch out there. It's probably 7, 8 miles away from the nearest highway. And we pull up, and there's a dead steer laying on the ground. And once again, of course, it's night, so I light it all up, and I treat it like a crime scene because I've learned my
Okay.
lesson from the first one. So
Right.
you approach from the outside in, and you document everything as you get closer and closer to the critter. And
Okay.
same exact mutilation, everything exactly the same: the ear, the tongue, the anus, the scrotum, uh, the eyeball. And but this one's been laying there probably, we estimated probably 4 or 5 days. It was starting to bloat a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I asked the ranch hand, I'm like, what do you think happened here? And he goes, I don't have a clue. But this is like the third one in this year that we've had like this. Now, there was no car tracks going up to it. There was no footprints going up to it. No animal mutilation or predation. No animal
Right,
predation
right.
going on there. Nothing touched this cow. And he goes, that's another weird thing. He goes, usually when we have a cow go down, we don't really worry about it too much because the coyotes will pretty much pick it clean in 2, 3 weeks. And so we just kind of leave it there. He goes, the last two mutilated cows he had, nothing would touch him. So they ended up tying him to a truck and dragging him off into a burn pit. And they just dug a hole with a backhoe and drug him into a hole and dumped old fuel on there and burnt him.
And
Because
that's what I hear, that predators stay away from it, from the carcass.
nothing touched that carcass. Nothing. It was so bizarre to see. And what really startled me was the lack of footprints, tire tracks. You don't go out that far into the middle of nowhere to kill a cow and not leave any tracks. Also, no bullet holes. There was no. Once again, we couldn't tell what killed this cow. So,
Mhm.
and these are wild range cows. I mean, you don't just walk up to a steer in the middle of the desert and pet it on the head. Those things are pretty wily. I mean, you got to
Right,
kind of be
right. Exactly. They're
cautious.
well, there was one that I was reading about that I want to say, was it Marlene? Was it Wyoming? Same thing. And took they were even going like you said, there was no obvious besides the mutilation, no bullet holes. So they did a necropsy, they looked at the tissue, there was no disease, but they did find some barbiturate like chemical in the bloodstream.
Hmm.
All right. That was about, but again, which is unusual because usually, you know, cows or steer, whatever, they're not, where are they going to get,
Right.
were they tranquilized?
Right. It,
But they
it
were, in
makes
other words, they weren't sick. It wasn't like they were sick with something and they dropped there and,
the cuts on those things are precise. They're very clean cuts, so it's definitely not an animal. And up until you experience one firsthand, you kind of take it with a grain of salt, thinking, well, I could probably figure out what's going on. And I thought of myself as a pretty good investigator. After all, I was a senior
mm-hmm,
criminal investigator for the state of New Mexico. Uh, no, there's. I interviewed people. I talked to the ranchers. The ranchers just kind of chalk it up as a loss. They don't want to get too involved. I don't know why. I did a report, an actual police report, and the sheriff told me to knock it off. He says there's
are
more
you
important.
serious?
Oh, absolutely. He said there's more important things to do out here besides doing cow reports. And by the way, the sheriff was a rancher himself. He goes, we have more important things to do besides you spending all night out there with the cows. I'm like, but, and he goes, no buts. That's an order. Live with it. And I'm like, yes, sir. Uh,
And let
one
me ask you
thing,
something though, don't they, I don't know, this might be a stupid question, are these cattle insured, or is it just too bad you just lost a head of cattle?
some ranchers have their cattle insured. Most of
Mm-hmm.
them don't. It's too expensive.
Okay.
So like the last one, the one with the cow head, he told me they don't have insurance. That's a loss. They just take it as a
Right,
loss.
and that's where I was going was I was thinking, well, if they have insurance, I'm sure the insurance would want like a police report or
Right.
something to state, hey, yeah, it's true,
I couldn't
you know.
understand why they would accept it as a loss because a steer. This was probably a 3-year-old steer.
Hmm.
Back in those days, it's probably worth about $2,500.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big loss. So nothing made any sense. Even the ranch hand, he was as perplexed as me. He goes, I don't know why the ranchers don't do anything about it. I don't know why anybody tries to not get involved or stop it. People say it's a cult, and I'm like, if it's a cult, they're floating. They're not leaving any tracks. They're not leaving any
Right.
trace evidence, any forensic evidence at all. The only
Hmm.
thing I found that tied to mutilations through interviews was helicopter sightings. Uh, Several times the night before, helicopters were heard flying close to the ground, low to the ground.
That's
And I've
interesting.
actually seen it twice myself, low
Okay.
flying helicopters. And one time I tried chasing him down. Of course, I couldn't make it. But I had dispatch call Air Force Base, see if they're doing any maneuvers out in the area. Of course, they're not going to tell you the truth anyway. But
Yeah, but
there's a correlation between unmarked helicopters, meaning they have no navigational lights going on. They should have some kind of beacon, strobe or something.
mhm.
Um, every time they're spotted, they have no identifiable lights on them. So, and like I said, I've seen them twice. So there's something, I don't know why, going on with that. In my mind, if the government wanted to mutilate cows and test them for some kind of disease or something, wouldn't it be easier just to buy it from the rancher or go to the
Exactly.
auction and buy it? Why do you really have
Mhm.
to go out there and abduct one and then drop it back off out there?
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, it's like, this is not something so forbidden, like, hey, this is the only way we can get a hold of this animal to do
Yeah,
this is this way.
yeah.
So,
And it's always the same parts they're taking too, which is bizarre to
yes.
me. Also, it's still a enigma. I mean,
Yeah, I went to this
what?
website where they have have the cattle and they'll show all the different parts of usually that it's sold. They're
Yeah,
saying these parts that are missing are the least valuable parts that usually are not, from a cattle. It's not even that
yeah.
you can say, well, it's killed for its meat. No, it wasn't.
No, no, it just has no meat value at all. And
Uh-huh.
the other thing, especially the older Hispanic people, lean more towards some kind of cryptid, some kind of unidentified creature that's doing this and that. Here, the skinwalkers are quite popular because we're really close to the Navajo res, but close as in probably 100 miles from it. But we're surrounded by reservations, and they all have not necessarily the skinwalker, but they all have some kind of weird cryptid creature in their folklore, and they really believe in them. And a lot of the people that I've talked to chalk it up as we don't talk about it, we don't want to know. It's doing what it's doing out there, and as long as it doesn't do it to us, we're okay with that.
Well, and this is the thing. It's true. You hear the skinwalkers, but supposedly the skinwalkers, as far as and I'm not Native American, so I'm just they're usually witches that practice dark magic and they can shapeshift and the skinwalking and things like that. Because if you go with the UFO extraterrestrials, like, okay, how many cattle do you have to mutilate? What is it that you're trying to find? What's
Right?
the purpose of it? Um, the skinwalker is like what? It only eats this part of the cattle for some reason. Um, the thing about the helicopters, that's interesting, but at the same time, like you said, why?
Yeah.
This is not something that you would have to sneak in a helicopter to do what with it. Okay. Um, now, and this is again, I would not put it also. This is just me. Uh, Even though, like you said, I didn't see any tracks and that's another thing that I've heard that when they find these cattle, there's no sign of a struggle. There's no sign of where this
Yeah.
animal was like both, trying to get away from whatever. It's just there. Um, that I will tell you in some occult practices, how can I tell you if they have the money and it's super special, they want how's this premium ingredients. Because you could say, well, if they wanted a cow tongue, you could go to some of these butcher shops and they'll sell you a cow tongue.
Right.
You know, it's not something that you could say, well, unless we land on the cattle and take it. That's the only thing that I could think of as plausible. Besides, I don't know.
That's probably the most common thought that it's some kind of cult. But I kind of ruled that out because unless they can levitate and float,
That's
there would
that's
be
the other
there'd
part.
be
It's
trace
like,
evidence. You're not going to wrestle a steer to the ground and choke it out. You know, it's not easy killing an animal of that size. You're either
right,
going to have to cut its head off or you're going to have to shoot it. And there
right,
would be
and there's
hair.
no evidence of that.
There would be hair on the ground. There would be blood on the ground. There'd be body
Right.
fluids on the ground. There'd be a sign of a struggle. A cow doesn't just die. They fall down and kick and stomp around and roll around. None of that is visible. None of it. It's just a cow laying there. Just like it doesn't even look like it was dropped, because if it was dropped, it would leave some sort of impact crater or slight
Mm-hmm.
depression. Nothing. It's just like it just got laid there
Right. When you
through the air.
mentioned that, also that's another thing I've heard, that some of them, there's no blood. There's no blood
No blood.
evidence. There's
No blood.
no blood pooling, not like,
Nope.
which is very unusual. Like, where'd it
Yep.
go? Where did the blood go?
So like I said, it's a very perplexing. It makes no sense. As of right now, I have no idea who the heck or what's doing it.
And that thing, and maybe, like you said, maybe it's like, I'm not in on the joke. Like you said, that all these owners, everybody's like you said, over an animal that costs maybe a couple of $1,000, and you're losing maybe a few every year. I'd be upset.
The only thing I could figure with that is a lot of the owners are old Hispanic guys that
Mm-hmm.
believe in the weird occult
Yes.
stuff, and they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want you
Yeah,
going
they're
out there
like,
and causing a big fuss and maybe stirring up something that they don't want to deal with.
yeah, something, yeah, yes. And believe it or not, that people think that I've heard of uh drug busts and things like that, and by either local law enforcement or federal FBI, or for different reasons, and they'll find these huge altars and ritual stuff in these houses. In other words, they're not going in there for that, they're going for something else,
Hmm.
and they find all this ritualistic stuff, like, big time,
Yeah,
in
we've
some of
done
these
that.
houses, in big cities. And I'm not talking what I'm saying is, I'm not talking out in the middle of nowhere. I'm talking about
Yeah.
nice houses that, to look at them from the outside, obviously there's criminal activity going on, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, they do believe that this occult ritual or ceremony, whatever it is that they're invoking, truly does protect them.
Yeah.
As in, translates into what you're saying, that maybe the reason they're like, we're not going to talk about this, is because they really do believe that
See,
there's going to be something metaphysically backlash against them.
what we have going on out here is the indigenous Hispanics out here all consider themselves Spanish. And then we
Yes.
have a pretty good population of Mexicans that come across, and they don't really see eye to eye with each other because the Spanish think of
That's,
themselves as much more
that's so funny. Yes.
more elitist. So, but the
Yes.
Spanish out here are the Catholics that are also raised up partially with their weird rituals and their voodoo
Hmm.
influence and whatever else they got going on. The Mexicans that come across here bring their Santeria stuff with them.
Yes.
They bring Santa Muerte is huge with those guys. When you pulled them over to their
Hmm.
cars, they always had the little
Yes.
skeleton guy hanging in there. Uh, a whole different breed, and we haven't really had too many problems with the Mexican population and weird occult stuff. It's usually the indigenous people here that seem to
Hmm.
have the secret. They've been here so long and stuck in their ways and
Yeah.
can't quite put a finger on it.
I have a friend of mine. I've interviewed him a few times. He does tours out of Albuquerque,
Mm-hmm.
and he's talked to me about a lot about some of the belief systems there, and things that you see and hear. As far as that stuff, that in some cases go back hundreds of years, as far as the belief systems.
Oh yeah, we're
Uh,
30 miles east of Albuquerque.
okay, and they that yeah, that even, how's this, that even though they might all consider themselves Catholic, how's this, they have their divisions amongst themselves, because some of them bring in a lot of they synchronize, like you said, with Santa Muerte
Mm-hmm.
and things of this nature. And let me tell you something. In Santa Muerte, there's a lot of people that really truly believe in that. As a matter of fact, now, and the what is it, the day after Halloween, I think, I don't know if it's November the 1st or the 2nd, which is Dia de los
It's,
Muertos, as
yeah,
far as
it's the first.
the first, right? The
Yeah.
1st of November. Yeah. um that tradition, I mean, as far as visiting the dead, and if you want to look at it maybe as almost like ancestor worship, but yeah, the Santa Muerte definitely has a very, very dark aspect to it. And
Hmm.
like I said, here when I grew up in Miami, there's Santeria has a very dark aspect tied into the drug trafficking all the time. You see that. That's like, same thing. You would have a police bust a trafficker, and he would have this huge statues and altars, and
Oh,
dating
we've,
back.
we've seen that a lot, a lot. So the drug traffickers, mostly from Central and South America, not necessarily
Yes,
Mexicans, but from anywhere down there. But we've seen anything from dried rattlesnakes that they
yeah,
used,
yeah.
the various parts of animals and all kinds of saints, tons of Catholic saints. There's a saint for
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, we used to see that quite a bit.
and they're just representations. They're just
Yeah.
representation. As a matter of fact, recently I wrote up an article that, which I didn't know about it. I was doing the research that when Noriega, that we brought him in from Panama, and stuff like that. When the U.S. forces went to where he lived, because he had like a couple of houses and stuff, they found altars and stuff to put curses on people in all the places he was at, and that he had a Brazilian witch that basically was doing, the work for him. And they said that, I can't remember which house it was. They found the pile of what they thought at the beginning were cocaine packs, because they were like all
Hmm.
wrapped up and stacked. So here they're thinking it's a big drug bust, and then when they open it, they were cursed. Had slips. It was not drugs.
Hmm.
They had, it was like a prepared ritual, and they had the names of different people in there, and these were
Wow.
all people that were being cursed.
Wow.
Okay, and like all stacked up. In other words, this guy believed in this. It wasn't like, you
It's
know,
it's the it's the powerful belief. I mean, they believe. What happened here in some of our land grant communities I was talking about earlier. I remember responding to it's always toned out by dispatch as a CPR in progress, and it turns out always that the person's been dead for a while. But we get toned out to a CPR in progress call in one of those mountain areas, and we get there, and there's probably a 30-year-old female in the middle of the living room on her hands and knees, and she's already got partial rigor. you know, she's obviously been dead for a while and looked like a heroin overdose. Heroin is really bad out here. But
mm-hmm,
we weren't allowed to do anything until every family member was notified and was allowed to say goodbye to the body. That's part of their ritual, because if they're not allowed to say goodbye, then something weird happens. I can't remember what exactly the consequences are. But some of the family members are 60, 70 miles away.
I was about
And
to say,
the OMI is already there. And the OMI was a really cool old man. He's been in OMI for like 40 years. Just recently passed, by the way. But he was really knowledgeable when it came to that kind of stuff. And me being a fairly new cop, I'm like, let's bagger and get on with this. I got to go eat lunch. And he goes, no, 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 we can't do this. And I'm like, why not? He goes, if you want to write on your hands, these people will kill you. I'm like, what? He goes, we cannot touch the body until everybody comes over here. So I called the sheriff and I'm like, I'm stuck over here. And he goes, well, so you're stuck over here. Just wait. So me and another deputy ended up waiting probably hours until the last person from a little town named Corona showed up.
right.
And they walk in there and touch her and say a little blessing and stuff. And finally, when all the family members were exhausted, then we were allowed to, put her in a body bag, and oh my, was allowed to.
Let me ask you, did anybody ever say what would happen if not everybody was able to say goodbye?
I
Would
want
she
to say
like come
yes.
back?
I want to say yes, but I don't want to. I don't want to guess on what they said because I can't remember. But it had
Mm-hmm.
something. It had something to do with the afterlife, where if they didn't get to say goodbye, that this person would never be at peace or something like that.
Okay.
And keep in mind, these people predominantly speak Spanish, and
Right.
I speak about 70%, 60% Spanish, so a lot of it gets lost in translation over there.
Mm-hmm.
But that was definitely one of their deals. Talking to some of my friends that grew up out there, it's like, yeah, that's what they do. They do some kind of weird. They take a chicken egg or a duck egg. And if you're sick, they'll rub it all over your body. And my friend
Yeah.
swears up and down. I've never seen it, but he swears up and down that when they open up the egg, there's hair and stuff in there and weird stuff. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, that can't be right. And he goes, no, that's really happens.
Well, usually what they do it is they'll start at the head and go down your body, and then the last part is rub it up on the soles of your feet, and of course you're supposed to be naked, okay? And then they're supposed to smash it, and usually it's I've heard of that. I've never seen them, but I've heard of stuff like that. Or sometimes even if they break in, there's nothing in there, that it's supposed to also do a spiritual cleansing. And some of them do it like on New Year's Day or New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
They'll do like a spiritual cleansing, like of negativities. But the egg being almost, for lack of a better word, like the scapegoat kind of deal. Like this is where you're going to put it into, which is along the same ideas. Remember when I told you that backpack bulging with chopped
Mm-hmm.
up chickens?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, those chickens took whatever they were trying to get rid of. And when I asked you to think about the railroad out here, you will find a lot of these sacrifices on railroad tracks for the same reason, so that the usually it's a cleansing or something will leave the iron from the railroad tracks,
I can see that. Yeah.
and the railroad going, the train going somewhere, it will not be able to go back. In other words, you're taking it away, so it will not
Mm-hmm.
return to its point of origin. But yeah, you see that in South Florida, especially. You see that a lot. You see it a lot, and most people are like, I don't want to. Even people that don't believe in it are like, nah, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to leave that alone. It's like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that and it's that same belief system that in other words, and a lot of it, it's metaphysical. I've heard of some of these. I don't want to say witch doctors. They could be Babala priests or whatever. Whoever's doing this. By the way, some of them don't come cheap. They charge a lot sometimes for the work they do, you know. And I've even heard some of them that will work, let's say with let's say a drug trafficker or everything. They got somebody in the payroll and the police trying to, hey, buy them off.
Right.
And this
Right.
drug trafficker's thinking this guy's wonderful, he's powerful. Is that you got this guy paying somebody off in the background, like, hey, make sure don't stop that car or something.
Right. Right.
But the
I can see that.
belief is very, very powerful in that whole thing of, and this is the thing that people don't realize. If you go strictly by Catholicism, you wouldn't come to a Catholic saint and ask him, please make
Oh yeah.
sure that my drug my drug deal goes down smooth. So that's why you turn to these darker gods, if you want to look at them, or saints, that basically they cover them up. That's how they work it, where, because basically you're asking either to curse somebody, or to basically shield you from the law,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
deal. As a matter of fact, that story of Noriega, this was during the times that Reagan was the president, and they found Reagan's name on a piece of paper with some wax from a candle, and under an ashtray. And
Wow.
but he had put on there a bunch of people, like in the government, important people. They
Jesus.
found this stack of wrapped up stuff, and it was like they couldn't believe it when they saw it. They said, "Oh my God, drugs! We found the mountain of little wrapped up tamales of cocaine." No, it wasn't that. It
Yeah.
was curses, things of that nature. But yeah, I imagine that. Yeah, and that thing that you talked about, that the Indians out there, you talk about skinwalkers, and they'll just walk away from you and say, "We're not talking about that."
Yeah.
I've heard
I've
that
had
they.
several friends that were Navajo Rangers, and
Uh-huh.
they absolutely will testify to the fact that they've seen skinwalkers. They've seen their footprints. They've seen them in person. Um, in fact, the Navajo Rangers are tasked with investigating any paranormal call on the reservation. They're taken
Really?
serious. Yeah, if there's a person on the reservation says they hear a woman crying in the woods, or a wolf howling or something, that has to be investigated.
Oh my God.
And they absolutely believe in it. There's no doubt about it.
That must be a tough call, because if their belief, hey, we heard a woman crying out, and it's like, and I got to go investigate that. What?
Yeah, yeah. They're
Because
they're,
as far
they're
as
pretty tough
from what I
guys.
understand, they don't even want to acknowledge it, because it's like calling it to you.
Yeah, yeah. They're pretty tough people, but it works. It really works. My career,
Oh, everybody over here is getting all excited. Be quiet, you guys. Oh,
in my career, I've arrested several Native Americans, especially Navajos. Probably most of the time for shoplifting, or because they were so intoxicated, and I take them to the jail. and they'd be raising hell in the
Mhm.
back of my unit. It was a 30-mile drive to the jail, and they'd be banging their heads on the cage and calling me all kinds of names. And all I'd have to say is like, "Hey, dude, cut it out, man. I'm a skinwalker." Worked every time like a charm. They would say, "This
They'd
isn't
be like, "What?"
funny. Don't even mention his name." And they don't call it. I can't remember what the Dene word for skinwalkers. They don't call it skinwalker, but when you say skinwalker, they know what I'm talking about. And they don't think it's funny at all. They behave themselves immediately. So
All of
there's
a sudden,
something
that's
to it.
like the talk about the magic word.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not like they pretend. They do believe in it. They really do
Absolutely.
believe in it. Yeah, this is not like, oh, it's a, yeah, it's something that you tell the kids to scare them. No.
Yeah, it's more than a ghost story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Especially talking to the rangers who have seen them, and it's like, wow,
And out there,
uh,
they also have that the legend, which I know there's different versions of La Llorona, which is the crying woman.
yeah. I don't think
Um,
that legend started here. I think that might be. I'm not sure if it's Puerto Rican or not, but the legend exists out here. La Llorona, she exists, a wailing
right,
woman.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
That out
It
there,
was
that's
a real
supposed to
thing. It was a real thing. I mean, real
right
in
that
belief.
that
People believe it.
right. And I've always heard, well, you read like different versions, but bottom line is like she wants your children either to replace the ones she lost, something like that, something along those
Yeah,
lines. But I heard that that's a very that's a like everybody knows. You say that Llorona, everybody's like, yeah. Or they tell the
yeah.
kids, be good, or La Llorona's gonna get you, or gonna take you, or something like that.
Especially in the center part of New Mexico, it's a real common legend because of the river runs through there. There's river and irrigation ditches,
Yes.
lots of water, and that's what La Llorona is all about. Because I think her kids drowned. So it's,
So, Ike, have you gone lately to any ghost investigations? I know you said you had slowed down out
I've sl-
there.
I've slowed down, but I'm getting ready to get back in it. I've taken almost a year's break from my YouTube channel because it became work. I'm
Yeah.
retired, and also, when you're trying to get content so bad, then it starts becoming kind of worthless. Kind of you're putting out videos just for the sake of putting out videos.
Right.
And I don't want to be that guy. If I want to put out a video, I always want it to be a real thing, and I just had to stop for a while. I got scared a couple of times, and I remember when I got sick. The story I told you about getting sick. Uh, I'm not willing to go out there and push it and put myself in some kind of peril for a YouTube
Sure.
video. You know?
Have you
So
had anything follow you home?
several times from the mine shaft, or from the mine area, not necessarily the shaft. Any
Okay.
Everything from our TV turning on twice by itself in one night, which was fantastic. I thought that only happened in movies. It's starting to get dark in here for me. Um,
Okay.
uh, 11 o'clock at night, my wife says, "Hey, did you turn the TV off in the living room?" I'm like, "Of course," because it's really bright. It's a big screen TV. She goes,
Uh-huh.
"Well, it's." I'm like, "All right." So I get up and I turn the TV off, go back to bed, and like 10 minutes later, she goes, "It's on again." I'm like, "Oh, hell no." So my first thought is, where's the remote at? Maybe the dog stepped on the remote or something. I'm like, no, the remote's up on the counter where it belongs. The TV turned on twice that night. Pretty strange. I have a
Mm-hmm.
piano in my living room. And this happened during the day. We're all in the kitchen cooking. I'm helping my wife cook dinner. I'm chopping onions for burritos. And the piano plays three notes. It's like ding, 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 like a C chord.
Right.
And the lid is down on the piano. And we both look at each other. I'm like, "Are you serious?" And I walk over there and I look at the piano and I pick up the lid, expecting like a cartoon mouse running up and down the keys or something.
Right.
Not possible because the lid sits so close to the keys. There's no space in
Yes.
between there.
Yes.
It played three notes, clear as day. I mean, we've had quite a few things happen at our house, and my wife has seen everything from shadow people. She sees a lot more than I do. She's much more intuitive when it comes to that stuff. Um, but yeah, there's activity.
But
We
see
don't
that
seem,
piano thing, that's unmistakable. That's unmistakable. It's
yeah,
like piano is a piano.
we
And the
don't
reason
mind
why I
it.
know is that I used to have a piano for many, many years.
Yeah,
And there's the only thing that sounds like a piano is a piano.
yeah, and we don't mind it. We don't get upset or irritated with it. We just make it clear. You're here. You're here. You can stay here if you want. Just don't cause us any harm. Don't be an ass. Um, so we're
Usually,
okay with it.
usually they'll go away on their own if you don't give them too much. Yeah, that would happen. I had
I
gone
gotta
on
turn my light off.
investigations that sometimes people stuff you would hear stuff comes
Oops.
back with some of them for some reason.
Well, that looks
And
terrible.
you were fine before. I don't know if
That's not good. Turn it back up. Guess it's going to be dark.
that's fine. You're coming in great. Does the light look at me? My camera, when I reset everything, the brightness on my camera settings went. Whoop.
Oh,
So I'm
okay.
gonna have to. I look like I'm in the and I'm in a headlight. With the light you've got coming off your screen, you're fine.
I usually have a
But
ring light set up somewhere, but I didn't do it this time. So I
it's
didn't
like
think it was going to get dark that
for
early.
me, it's like doesn't matter. But yeah, the because I have been doing it since the '90s for investigations, and every once in a while we would have stuff follow people home. And basically, we learned after a while when we weren't really sure what it was. It would be just like something like that, but don't start the communication process because then after a while it's not going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while they just be on their way, it'd fade off and things would stop.
And
uh,
we're all just amateurs. Nobody's an expert in
no,
this, and you don't know what kind of lasting effects this can have on you. I
sure.
used to always wonder, especially working in the prisons in my younger days, there are
Mhm.
so many mentally ill people in prison.
Oh yeah.
And some of them, you wonder, are they possessed? They didn't start out mentally ill. There was
Yes.
guys with upside down crosses tattooed on their foreheads, all kinds of
Yes.
satanic tattoos. How did they end up this way? Were they
Yeah.
pushing and pushing and pushing until they finally got something that showed them what's
I
up?
remember one time I went to the prison over in Moundsville in West Virginia. It's empty now, but this was built by us by Civil War prisoners, whatever. And it was incredible because when they do the tour and you go to all these cells, which by the way are like this small, you would see so much of like what you're talking about, satanic. Uh, I guess these guys had nothing better to do, that they would draw it on the walls and things like that. It's there, and that was a pretty dark place. But yeah, I see what you mean. It wasn't just like, oh, they're criminals, and yeah, and that thing with them being mentally ill, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Was it the mental
Exactly.
illness? Because some of these, it makes you think, okay, you were so mentally ill that you committed a crime and then you ended up here.
Yeah.
All right. Even though, from what I understand, a lot of prisons now they treat people
Yes.
with mental illnesses or behavior disorders. They give them some type of medication to help them deal with it. I guess because if not, I imagine they would be even more difficult to basically house in a prison.
And I've always believed, if you were an ass when you were alive, most
Oh,
likely you're an ass when you're dead.
oh, absolutely.
You're probably not going to change your ways much.
Well,
So,
as is being nice about it. If you were
yeah.
a very dark, violent person, I'm not talking about here somebody with a bad temper. I'm talking somebody really dark. And let's
Yeah.
face it, you in death, you're like that or much worse.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, you might even be one of these that's afraid to let's go to that proverbial light because you're
Right.
thinking this light's going to do a U-turn. It's going to take me, the
Yeah.
hell. Because even the people if they had, even though they might have believed it the majority of the time that they were alive, they think about that. What if I end up there? What if that place is real?
Yeah.
What if there is such a thing as hell? I don't want to go there. So I'll just
Yeah.
hang out here. But yeah, I remember one time I had a professor that before he was teaching, he used to be, I guess, like an in-house either counselor or psychologist in one of the prisons. I want to say Missouri, somewhere. And some of the things he described that some of these prisoners would do to themselves because their mental illness was severe. Even though they were being
Hmm.
given meds and stuff, it was like pretty horrific. Some of the things that he talked about that he witnessed, um, when he was there.
We
So,
the state pen in New Mexico where I started my career had one of the bloodiest riots in American history. The New Mexico State Penitentiary. There's been several books written on it. Hell's Kitchen, I think, is one of them. Can't remember what
hmm
the other one's called. But I didn't work there during the riot. The riot was in the early '80s. Uh, when I worked there, I think it was '94 or '95, somewhere in there. But you talk about a haunted place. There
I
wasn't a
bet.
corrections officer or a staff member there that didn't have an experience in that place. It was just mind-boggling and haunted.
I
I'm
believe
saying
that. I
they
definitely
they
believe
closed it.
that. You know, one time I was going cross country. My son was stationed in California in the Navy, and he wanted a Jeep, and we got it cheaper for him in Florida. So I agreed to go cross country, drive it, and I would fly back. And one of the times, I want to say it was New Mexico that I was driving through, and there's nothing out there. And I remember that there was a couple of these exits where there was no, they would have these signs, do not pick up hitchhikers, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And off the exits there would be like no gas station, nothing,
Hmm.
like no reason for you to get off. And I think I had a friend of mine that drove with me. She's lived out in California. She flew and went back with me. But finally, I guess we got off on an exit and we saying, what is this thing with not picking up hitchhikers? And they're like, oh, because there's a prison out there somewhere.
Yep.
And
Yep.
they're like, they don't want you to, like, if there's a hitchhiker out there, it's maybe, somebody that got out of the prison. I was like, oh, that's good to know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember one time we got off, I can't remember, we were still in New Mexico or was it Arizona? I can't remember. But we would always try to stop before it got dark. It was one of those days that we didn't. We got off on one of these exits where it was like a few hotels. It wasn't, I guess it was like a really small town around this exit, not big. But surprisingly, there's like three hotels and they're like full of cars. And we're like, what is this? And we got, was it a Holiday Inn or something like that? I can't remember. We got the last room and they telling us, oh, it's that they were doing some type of work out there, like the government. So they were basically rooming all these people and all these three hotels. So I
Hmm.
say, look, we're getting this room ready. You got the last one. Give us like 15 minutes. Come back in and we could. Okay, great. So we're sitting out in the parking lot, and across the street it looked like it was an old gasoline station falling on hard times. And we're in a Jeep, which everything is open. We had taken the doors off. And all of a sudden, I've never heard a woman scream like that before, by the way. I heard a woman scream like they were killing her. I'd never heard somebody scream. It wasn't like I'm scared. It was beyond I'm scared. It's like they're killing me.
Hmm.
So much so that it came like from where that gas station, that abandoned gas station. So I'm ready to leave it. My friend grabs me. She's a little bit smart. She goes, where are you going? I was like, something. She goes, you can't go out there. She's like, hold on. So I called the police, of course. And I just happened to know where I was because I just exited. I said, look, it's right off the exit, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, I think it was a trooper, state trooper. He came down and, you know, he came up to us real quick. And I said, look, we were sitting here. And some woman screamed like they were killing her, literally killing her. And it came from over there. And he goes, okay. And after that, we never found out what happened because we went in and he never, we never followed up or anything like that. But let me tell you something. That was an incredible experience when you're sitting out in the middle of nowhere.
Oh yes. That would be a show in itself. Just haunted hotels and motels. The town I worked in, where I was chief, we probably had 7 or 8, at least, hotels and motels, and we've had a couple of homicides and just people dying of natural causes. But there's a lot of reports coming out of those places of hauntings from
I
staff,
can imagine that
from
out
guests.
there. I don't you have. I imagine, like how they say bury them in the desert. I
Yeah,
imagine there's got to be a bunch of, well, a lot of people that they were killed and they were just dumped
absolutely.
somewhere, buried somewhere out there, and
Well,
know,
there's another famous case. I think 14 females have been unearthed west of Albuquerque, not far, just a couple of miles west of Albuquerque, up in the Mesa. I think they started unearthing them in the early 2000s, and every once in a while they'll still find a skeleton, and it's some kind of serial killer that was killing prostitutes.
let me ask you something. Is this a place? This is what I've heard. If this is the one that the area, it's kind of like a little bit lower, and I think somebody was doing acoustics where if somebody screamed down there because of the acoustics, you could not hear it or something like that. I think if
Mm.
it's the same thing, that was one of these because apparently, and they're like asking themselves, is this one person dumping all these people, or is it like more than one person going out there and dumping bodies?
They're thinking this was one, and it was a serial
What?
killer, and that he because the skeletons were all relatively close to each other out in the desert,
Oh,
just
really?
west of
Okay.
Albuquerque, and they were discovered because Albuquerque was encroaching. They're building houses out there, developing, and
Uh-huh.
the construction crew dug one up, and that's how they started finding him. And they're still finding him occasionally. So no clue on who it was or who did this. They have no suspects, but
Right.
they
And this is the thing
yeah,
that I tell somebody. If you well, now with DNA, they're being able to identify, especially if like your cousin gave the wanted to know what their ancestors were.
right,
But sometimes it's like if you don't know the identity of the victim, that makes it really difficult sometimes to figure out who could have killed her.
yeah.
Because sometimes you're hoping that if you know who the person is, who the victim is, then you're looking, okay, boyfriend, husband, or stranger on stranger, which I take it is most difficult to figure out.
One of the big things is just people disappearing. There's so many people that just disappear. They get listed as missing persons. They go into the data bank, and that's it. Never to be seen or heard from again. And that happens so much. It's no
That's
clue what's
that's
happening or where these people are going.
well with I think not too like a year, 2 years ago, didn't they identify that little Miss X? Was it in New Mexico or Arizona? That she had was found like back in the 60s. And
I believe that was in Arizona. Yeah.
and there was a little girl that went missing, but for some maybe it was because she was found like in a different state. Either she was taken from New Mexico and found in Arizona or something like that. And finally, like 2 years ago, through DNA, was that they were able to finally say, yeah, that's this little girl.
Yeah.
Um, but for years, she was unidentified. They had no idea who she was.
So many bodies are never found. I was very naive before I became a police officer. I was thinking murder is like the worst thing that could ever happen. And
Mm-hmm.
you kill somebody, you're going to end up in prison.
Sure.
Well, the truth is that probably two-thirds, especially out in the Southwest, of murders, unless they happen in a city, but the rural murders are never solved. Very seldom are murders solved
What is it?
because
No
they
body, no crime?
pretty much, yeah, you're just missing person. And even if you do find a body, it could be somebody on the interstate, a transient. It could be who knows. Nobody's seeing anything because it's so wide and open out here. Um, so many homicides are unsolved. They just
And,
go
and I imagine
so
also that
fast.
even if you find skeletal remains, sometimes the cause of death, like you said, was it somebody that came out here and just laid down and died, or they had
Yeah,
a heart attack,
yeah,
versus that they were killed. If you don't have tissues or muscles or anything,
yeah.
or unless like let's say if you imagine if you have a bullet hole, definitely. But if
That's
there's nothing like that,
yeah, yeah.
like who could what happened to this person? And what's really sad, I've heard also, I that it's surprising how many people go missing and the families never even issue a missing persons report on them.
Yep, yep. Even with younger people, like your
Yeah.
15-year-old daughter has been missing for 2 months, but you've never did a report
Right.
because you don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to be that parent, so you just assume she'll be coming home. And
Right. Or yeah, she ran away before and now it's like, okay,
yeah,
she's doing it again, so whatever. She'll like what you just said, she'll be back.
yeah,
And
yeah.
they they never there's and I'm thinking about that's pretty sad. That's pretty sad when you don't have anybody that cares enough about to say, well, at least I'm going to put a report, God forbid, if they
Hmm.
find anybody. But I wonder, like you said, I imagine most discoveries are going to be made like what you said, that killing field where for some reason they start digging for some reason and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, surprise.
Construction and just outdoorsy people going on hikes, going up into the mountains. Like I said, we have a lot of mountains. If you came on I-40, you didn't see New Mexico. You just seen I-40, mostly desert. If you go northern New Mexico, go southern, we have one of the largest wilderness areas in the lower states, and then
Uh-huh.
southern New Mexico. So there's a lot of hiking, outdoorsy stuff going on. And periodically, these hikers always come across remains of some sort.
Don't you have also heard of people, especially with the heat, sometimes they think they know what they're doing, they go hiking and then they get lost
That actually
or
happened this last spring in White Sands, New Mexico, which is in the lower lands down in the southern part of the state, and it's gets pretty hot. And I think these were a couple
Okay.
of tourists, and they were out there in the white sands. It was 100 plus degrees, and they're out there hiking around with no water or anything else. It got disoriented, and both of them died. I think it was boyfriend girlfriend or something like that.
Yes, I've heard of that. I
It's
heard of that.
pretty rare in New Mexico because we're not that hot. Although the last couple of years have been the weather's changing. It's usually
Hmm.
more of an Arizona, California thing. Like where I live, our usual high in summertime is maybe 90, 85, 90 degrees.
Really? Okay. You always think of it as being much hotter because
Yeah.
you always think of New Mexico desert, hot.
It's the terrain because like where I live, we're at 6,300 feet. So that's pretty
Okay,
high.
you're way up.
Yeah. And if you go down to Las Cruces, you might be at 1,000 feet. If you go up to northern New Mexico, you're at 9,000 feet. And the peaks are at 13, 14,000 feet. So there's
Who
there's a
can
lot of
breathe up there?
variation.
I'd be dying. I'd be like, I
Yeah.
can't breathe.
Yeah. There's a lot of variation here.
That, let me tell you. So do you are you planning on doing investigations? Is it residential, or are you going to go to historic places? Are you going to go back out to the mines? What are you planning on?
Yes on all three.
Okay.
Wherever the road leads me, whatever I find interesting at the time, that's what I'll be doing. Um,
Okay. Because I know sometimes in some cases, now that it doesn't have that much stigma, you'll even have businesses that want a group to come in and help them, first of all, confirm that they've got something paranormal, and if possible, even identify who the perpetrator is, as in who's the ghost. And
yeah,
sometimes it's who they think, and sometimes it's surprising if you can even either through research, or if you get a really good EVP, that it leads you away from who they think it is. It might be
yeah.
somebody that they don't expect to be the person.
I'm a huge believer in EVPs because they're so easy to capture and mind-bogglingly real. Everything else you use, SLS, I'm not a big believer in SLS. Uh,
Yeah.
any of the talk boxes, there's always that doubt. But with an
Yes.
EVP, when you're by yourself and your recorder's on and you're the only person there and you pick up something that's relevant to what you're doing out there in a whole different waveform, there's something to this. There's something strange going on. So sound
Yes.
waves and sound to me, I'm a musician, I play guitar and stuff. So I'm all about sound.
Hmm.
There's definitely something behind music, behind sound. There's a reason why so many cultures, chant. They have
Yes.
chantings, they have drum beats, there's all that
The
stuff
drum
going on.
beat, the drumming.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a big believer in that. It's hard
Yeah.
as far as going out to ghost hunt or investigate. It's hard to find a good group of people to do it with
Hmm.
because I've tried it in the past, and a lot of times you run into a lot of ego maniacs that think that know it all,
Paradrama.
or yeah, or they're narcissistic. It's all about them, and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
and I'm not about that. I don't have time and energy to deal with your crap,
Right.
and
Exactly.
because this is such a wild, diverse area out here, it's dangerous to do it by yourself.
Oh, sure.
I don't want to be 50 miles away from home in the middle of the mountains with no cell phone, ghost hunting, and break a leg.
One time I interviewed this gentleman, Patrick. I can't remember his last name right now. It escapes me. And what he would do is solo ghost hunting.
Yeah,
And he would go into some of these older places, and I'd say, "You're out of your mind."
yeah,
I said, besides the fact that if you get hurt, okay, even though I go, that some of these places you'll find squatters, right?
yeah. There's so many variables that could happen. One, you could
Yeah.
falling through a floor.
But yeah,
Uh,
you could fall through a floor, sure.
you could have a medical issue that suddenly
Yes.
attacks you. You could have some kind of weird possession. If there is some kind of weird spirit in there that's
Yeah.
after you, he could render you worthless, useless in there all of a sudden.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not a good plan. Kudos to the people that do that, but not me. No.
No, in my experience, I'd be like, nah. Well, for if you want to put the paranormal out of the picture, just safety wise, it's not a good idea.
Yeah,
It's not a good idea. Just even if you think you know where you're going, or you scouted it out, there's stuff that can still happen that you don't know.
yeah, absolutely.
Um,
With you on that.
Out here we had an old hospital that was empty for like 20 years. They finally demolished it this past summer. But kids, and you know how they want to go in there because it's the haunted
Hmm.
place. And like a few months right before they demolished it, some kid had come out from California to be with his family. He snuck in there because, of course, it's closed, and he stepped into what he thought was the stairwell to make a phone call. And apparently, he didn't realize it was dark, and he fell like 3 floors down, died.
Yeah, I
And
think I
I
heard.
heard that they found like one shoe on one level, his phone on one other level, and him at the bottom. And that happens easier than people think.
And out here, probably in Florida too, a lot of these investigators trespass, and that's a lot.
Mhm.
That's the last thing you want to do in New Mexico because everybody here carries a gun, and you don't want to be trespassing on anybody's property.
Of course not. Of course not. Even now, I tell everybody, once upon a time, most cemeteries, either they wouldn't close the gate or they wouldn't worry about it. But
Right.
even now, cemeteries, you're trespassing if you go in there
Yeah.
after hours or if they close the gate or
Yeah.
stuff like that, because they've had vandalism and things that like. So now, even cemeteries, you have to be really careful.
Even
Um,
here during the daylight, especially some of the old Spanish cemeteries, if you just they're not locked, but if you go in
mhm.
there and start screwing around with your camera and stuff, you'll get approached by somebody, and they'll say, "What are you doing?" And I'm just out here looking at the old graves, and they'll start things like, "Do you have family out here? Do you have any business here? Are you from here? You need to leave." That'll happen to
Yeah.
you out here.
Yes. Yes. That's what I'm saying. You need to really be careful with people. People take that seriously.
Hmm.
People, and well, I'm gonna and out there, I'm gonna speak for South Florida, which is one more. You would have a lot of besides people leaving ritual items there. You would have a lot of people taking stuff from the either, well, if it was graveyard dirt, then that's not a big deal. But you would have people desecrating graves to take body parts
Wow.
for ritual purposes. All right, forget because it's once upon a time when you would hear people would get buried with their valuables. That
Hmm.
families have gotten wise to that, so it's not a question of them breaking in to steal jewelry. Mostly, it's because and people don't realize that body parts for ritual items. There's people that collect them, by the way. There's weirdos that collect them, and I don't care if the weirdo who hears this, you're a weirdo. But there's people that they use them for, and they pay a lot. Uh, when we're talking skulls, fingers,
Yeah.
uh, different things like that, where they that's a big deal. As far as when you were describing people going into cemeteries and you get approached, one of the things is because they're afraid that you're trying to desecrate one of the tombs and take something from it.
And that used to be really common out in the Southwest, all the way up until probably the early 80s, especially with Native American burial sites.
Oh,
Until they passed a lot of laws against antiquities and human remains, it was not uncommon to dig up
mm-hmm.
a buried Native American and sell his skull, and they'd make ashtrays out of him, all kinds of weird stuff. So
Yes.
it was a happening
Yep.
thing. Pottery.
Things of this, and people think that there's like 3 or 4 months ago in Denver, there's a there's people that donate their bodies like after death, like don't bury me, I'm going to donate my body for medical purposes. And there's universities, but there's also private companies.
Hmm.
And in Denver, this company, which is the guy has like a cooler and they've got human heads in there. And he parks and somebody steals the heads along with a dolly from the truck. And the discussion. By the way, I've checked; they've never found out who it was. And I think nobody, whoever took those heads, knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
All right, and people don't realize that a head could go for $500. If it has a spinal cord, it go for like $1,300. Because you're thinking, who the heck is
Yeah.
going to steal a human head?
Yeah.
And obviously, and nobody, the name of the company was very ambiguous. It wasn't like dissection or anything. It was an ambiguous name that unless you knew what was in it, why would you take that cooler that had human heads in it?
That's crazy.
Yeah. And,
Hmm.
uh, and I don't know if you heard about that. The guy who was managing the morgue for Harvard. All right,
Yes.
Harvard had
Yes.
that gift. I was like, where he's, supposedly after these, people, again, the person or the family donates the body to the Harvard Medical School so that the students could dissect and do their thing. But supposedly, after they're done with it, they turn the remains over for cremation to a funeral home. Well, the Harvard, he's thinking, man, wait a minute, there's money to be made here.
Yeah, a little money on the side.
So he's like running a body part uh selling stuff, and yeah, they finally nabbed him because check it out. And I was like, how did they find that out? Because apparently he'd been doing this for a few years. Turns out down the line, one of the guys that ended up buying one of the body parts in Pennsylvania, he's getting divorced, and his ex-wife, one of the times, uh I mean, he's a kooky guy. If you see a picture of him, you're like, whoa. But anyway, she goes into a basement, and she smells something like really bad in the basement.
Oh boy.
And she goes and she looks, and there's these 5-gallon buckets, and it's full of skin and organs, human organs. So she wigs out. She calls the police. All right. And of course, it took off from there because, apparently, and that's how it got traced back to one of the is it he sold to different people who sold it to other people. But yeah, 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 that's how
That's,
you never know when you're gonna get. Then that's how and I don't know, I think it's still, and from what I understand, a lot of the families have a class action lawsuit against Harvard. And it's like, there you go. Sometimes when you think people are not that morbid, yes they are. If there's, what is it, follow the money.
it's always follow the money. And I've dealt with a lot of highly educated people, scientists, lawyers, and doctors that in my career that you would just think, once again, Harvard educated, and you would think they would do stuff like that. And sometimes they're worse. I don't know if they're
Yeah,
snapping or something happens. But
yeah,
yeah, I've had some pretty bizarre encounters with some really,
yeah.
really,
They
really
found one of the guys that they, like I said, once you find, then you start tracing.
yeah.
And they found one of the guys that was a buyer that kind of knew each other. He had like he had one of the skulls with like a scarf around it, and he had another one on his next to him on a pillow. And I'm like, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's
it's
like,
not normal.
that's kooky. That's
Yeah.
out there. It's like, okay,
Yeah, to me,
you know,
human body parts, to me are like, no, just nah.
right?
That's bad.
Exactly.
That's
Talk about
bad
bad
juju.
juju,
Yeah,
bad juju. I would, I wish you were in Florida, because you sound like you really know what you're doing. And the reason why I say that
thank
is
you.
I've been doing paranormal investigations since the 1990s, and I used to work with a research foundation that used to do the whole entire state of Florida. And I would do like a lot of the South Florida, or if they spoke Spanish, or if they were missing somebody called out at the last minute, hey,
Hmm.
so and so can't come, can you come in? And if it wasn't too far from me, I would drive. But I know exactly what you mean as far as finding a good group or people to go out. And like, nobody's in there for the sensationalism. They're basically there because they're interested in paranormal or capturing evidence or just seeing what happens, which, by the way, is not a guarantee. There's times that it's really boring, in a way. It's
Many
like,
times, yeah, many
so
times.
yeah, I know. I understand totally when you say about that. Sometimes that's a difficult thing, that you can't find anybody to, that you say, we're both on the same wavelength
Hmm.
when it comes to paranormal investigation. Yeah, everybody wants to be the next Zach Bagans.
Exactly. Yeah, just take some steroids and
Yeah, it's like, hey, what can I say? Well, let me tell you something. He did pretty well for himself. I remember I saw the original show that he aired
me
when
too. Yeah,
him and the other two guys. I think
yeah,
it was in one of the hotels out in Nevada.
yeah. Goldfield. I've been to the Goldfield.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's
Yep.
it's a good show, and as far as any of the shows go, you got to keep in mind they're for entertainment.
Sure.
Although I think he's fairly legit. He's outspoken. He's loud, but
Well,
to me, I
I
think
think he does it just because people, after a while, it's like, whether he is sometimes a jerk in real life. Some people got off on that. He's a jerk.
he's an A personality. And A personalities are sometimes like that.
Yeah.
I think he really believes in the paranormal. That's why he started a museum in Las
Yeah.
Vegas. So uh, I don't mind those shows at all. Some of them are blatantly fake. I had a couple of offers to be on shows, and
Mhm.
one of them I refused. I'm not going to give the names, but it was all set to go, and they were filming in Toronto, and I was supposed to go to Toronto, and then they sent me this big non-disclosure agreement, and basically all my work product, if they use anything that I do or anything I say, I can't say anything about it, and they made it clear that they would sensationalize certain aspects of it, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't talk about it or say anything about it on my YouTube channel. I'm like, oh no, thanks. I'm not that interested. And the same
Yeah.
thing happened. Like there was a show that ran for a while, Blind Frog Ranch. It's along with the Skinwalker Ranch thing.
What was the name of it?
Blind Frog Ranch.
What is that?
It,
Sound familiar, but keep going.
it's a pretty good show. And they offered me a deal too, and I just came across as too honest for them. They wanted a police investigator to join their team out there,
Right, to
and
be able to say that they had a okay.
yeah, and then I said, keep in mind, uh, I'm not going to lie, and I'm not into bullshit. That's
Mhm.
that's going to ruin my credibility. Just me personally, I don't feel I want to do that just to be on your show for one season. And yeah, it turned out they always have the same excuse. Well, we decided to go a different route. I'm like, good for you,
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
because I'm not gonna, my reputation is everything, and then I'm not gonna
Sure.
ruin it for some crappy little show.
Well, have you seen the last one that they've come out? It's called UFO Cowboys.
Oh my god, no.
The first season is out. Watch it. You need to watch it because but it's pretty decent. The people that they got for it are pretty decent. They really look like the real cowboys, not like not like somebody that
Yeah,
they put a hat on them and said, "Now you're a cowboy." No, these guys really do look like they are, and they're out there doing the UFO thing. Really, it's decent. The first
that
season
might
is
be
out.
all
If you
right.
have a chance, catch it. And you'll see what I mean.
Yeah, that might be. I'd give it a chance. Nothing else. I like watching those shows because they're entertaining, and I always
Oh
try to
yeah.
look at the angles and see, where's the script come in, because you can tell right away when it's scripted. And
Oh sure. And and that's the thing when somebody's done actual investigations that it's like some of these things if you're really doing a legit investigations it's real difficult to plan that
yeah,
at that moment something's gonna happen. How's that?
yeah,
It's like you can't. And like you said, it's entertainment, so they got to make sure they produce something or people be going like, oh, this is
yeah. The network would drop them if you're not making them any money. They're not going to sit there and support you.
well. Back in 2019, Zach Bagans, he bought the house. You remember the Tate LaBianca murders back in
Hmm.
for the Manson family? He bought the house where the LaBiancas were killed. Uh, because those two, the two murders, they didn't happen the
Hmm.
same night. And he bought it's like a two-bedroom, it's like a smaller home out in Los Feliz, I believe it is. And he bought it not to live in it. Apparently they were gonna do a some type of program, but it never and he just finished selling it not too long ago. Like last year he bought it because of the notoriety attached to that to that murder house. So yeah,
He also bought
he's
that house in Gary, Indiana. I think.
oh yeah, and that got torn down, but that was a lot cheaper, I'm sure, than this. This one was
Yeah,
like a
certainly was.
$2 million or
Yeah,
something. It was a hefty price.
yeah.
But yeah, from what I understand, the one in Gary, Indiana, they tore it down, and I believe I heard that Netflix bought the rights to the story from the family that was living there. The lady with the three children and her mom
Hmm. Hmm.
bought the rights for the story. I don't, if whether they do anything with it or not, you know. But
Well,
yeah.
there's such things as haunted houses. I can guarantee you that. I mean, I've lived in several.
Oh,
So.
forget it. I'm sorry. You've got the best. That animals in the kitchen. That has got to be the best. I'm telling you because sometimes there's so many things that sometimes things occur that okay, this is not my imagination. It could not be something else that sounds like this, or it could be no, and that's got to be one of them. That's got to be one of them. That's what a great story that is. Again, I would love to have you come back, especially if you get to do some investigations. You told me you're going to get back into that
Yeah,
up and running kind of deal.
yeah.
But I would love to have you come back and we can talk some more about what happens out there New Mexico way.
I still got plenty of stories. I've lived in a pretty haunted house here in New Mexico, and my tree people story. There's lots of
Oh my
stories.
God, yes, before I forget, no, you got to tell me the tree people story. You got to tell me the tree people story. What is that?
There was a period, and I came up with that name. I'll take full credit for it.
Okay.
But there was a time, and it was probably about 2005 or so, 2004, where suddenly we started getting a lot of dispatch calls, 911 calls of
Hmm.
people in trees. People just frantic. There's somebody up in my tree. We can't get him out of the tree. It's always nighttime because I work night. And I always assumed methamphetamines because this was during the meth area too. And sometimes it
Hmm.
was a person high on meth that was just seeing hallucinating things. But oftentimes it was not. And there was times where I pull up to a house and the owner would be standing outside with his rifle or shotgun pointing it up the tree. And I'm like, there's nobody up there, dude. Just calm down. No, no. And he'll describe them to a T. A lot of times, most often than not, the people were wearing some kind of camouflage, like military type camouflage up in the
So
trees.
in other words, it wasn't they had a good description. In other words,
A lot of times people shot holes in their ceiling because they were so freaked out and their gun went off. One guy tried to cut his tree down, a giant pine tree that's up in the mountain areas, and this is a ponderosa pine that's probably got a circumference of 5-6 feet. And he's like halfway through this tree with his chainsaw, and his chainsaw quit. And me being an ex-logger, I'm like telling this guy, like, you're damn lucky your saw quit because this tree was going to fall right on your house. But he
right?
was so obsessed. But the icing on the cake for the tree people call is Halloween night of all nights. We're working, and it's always a special night when you're caught. And we get this call at 2 o'clock in the morning of people in the trees, another tree people call. It's in a mountainous area, probably 30 miles away from where we're at. And I'm thinking meth again. So I tell dispatch to tell the reporting person to get in their car, drive down to the main road to the pavement, and meet me there. Because I'm not blindly going to drive off into the forest, into an ambush. So me and my ghost hunting buddy proceed that way. And as we get closer to that area on that paved road, a Jeep Cherokee passes us, flashes lights, turns around. It's the reporting person. They stop. Female gets out and runs towards us, just frantically waving her arms. You guys got to help. You got to help. My husband's back at the house. He's got one of them at gunpoint and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, do you have any guns in your car? Yeah, I got a rifle here. I'm like, I'm not following you anywhere until I get your rifle. So give me your rifle. I put it in the back of my car. I said, if everything's good, I'll give it back to you. Lead the way. So we drive up this little paved road, turns into a dirt road, and to the left is a wrought iron gate. She opens up the gate. We drive through, and it's probably a quarter mile of just a narrow little dirt road going through a bunch of arroyos. I don't know if you know what arroyos are, ditches. And we get to this ancient old farmhouse. And as we pull up, the owner's standing out there pointing up in a tree with a rifle in his hand, and same story, really. So we get out, and she's still freaking out. And we calm him down, get his gun from him, and ask him what the heck's going on here. And he says there's a guy up in the tree. And I'm like, there's nobody in the tree. We check the trees. We check him for footprints. We did find some footprints near the tree that neither one of those matched the people there. But as far as we could tell, nothing. I'm like, you guys are freaking out. So we ID him. We go inside the house, calm them down, ID them. And they live in Albuquerque, and this land in the house belongs to one of their relatives that's been abandoned for years. And they're out there spending a couple of nights just to see what it's like.
All right.
And both of them are scientists, and they both work for Sandia Laboratories. So I'm like, oh my God, I'm dealing with educated people. I thought you guys were a bunch of meth heads. And I'm like, all right, well,
Mm-hmm.
there's nobody up in the tree. So, if anything else happens, feel free to call us. I'm out till 4 o'clock today. So we leave. And as we're leaving on this dirt road coming out, there's a telephone pole laying across the road. And we had CBs in our cars too, so we could talk privately back and forth, me and
Right.
my buddy. And I tell the guy behind me, I said, dude, was that pole laying there before? And he goes, no, I don't think so. So I stop and I get out of my unit, and I had brand new tires on my units that left nice impressions in the dirt. And you could see where I drove, and there was no pole there before. I'm like, that's weird. So we drive around the pole, and we get up to the gate, and the gate's closed. And I'm like, I was the last one in, and I didn't close the dang gate. And not only is the gate closed, but there's almost what looked like the Blair Witch symbol made out of
Uh-huh.
PVC pipe leaning up against the gate. I'm like,
That's
holy
weird.
crap, something's happening here. Something's weird. I'm starting to get tingly. So we're sitting there opening up the gate, and we park outside the gate discussing what just happened. Like, that's weird. While we're sitting there talking, she comes driving out of there in her Jeep again, and she sees us and flashes her light and yells and screams. My husband captured one. He hit one with a blue rock. I'm like, a blue rock, huh? Yeah,
Okay.
I hit him with a blue rock, or he hit him with a blue rock. He's laying there. I'm like, fantastic. Get back in our units, drive over there as quick as we can. We get there. He's pointing off into the forest. It's all forested area. And he goes, I got one. I hit him with a blue rock. And I'm like, a blue rock? Yeah, there's a blue rock. And he points, and sure enough, there's a pretty good sized blue rock laying there that's been spray painted for whatever reason. But
Uh-huh.
it was a blue rock. And you can see footprints. I'm like, oh, there's really somebody out there. So we bring him back in the house, and we're talking to him. We're calming him down. And this is where it gets really weird, because I said, you guys are hallucinating. We're trying to, although we know somebody's out there, we're not trying to make them tell them there's somebody out there to scare them even
Right.
worse. I said, here are your options, guys. Get in your car. We'll follow you back out to the main road, go back to Albuquerque. Or we're going to take all your guns because we're afraid you guys are going to hurt each other tonight, shoot somebody innocent, and you can pick them up tomorrow morning at the sheriff's department. And while we're sitting there talking, I asked the guy, I said, I don't want to offend you, but I ask everybody I deal with, because I deal with it so much, are you guys doing methamphetamines? And he's like super offended. He's like, oh, hell no, I'm a scientist. I don't do methamphetamine. And she's like, come on, tell him the truth, honey. I'm like, oh, here we go. So he says, yeah, we tried meth a couple of nights ago for the first time ever. Please don't tell us. We have security clearances and stuff like that. Don't tell on us. And I'm like,
Oh.
oh, great. You guys are freaking out. So when's the last time you slept? Because we slept last night. We just took a little bit. And I'm like, why? What's the matter with you people? We're going to take your guns. If you guys don't want to leave, call us if something else happens. Now I'm just brushing them off. I'm like, you guys are just
Right. Yeah. Your credibility just got shot.
you're a bunch of friggin' druggies. So
Yeah.
we leave. We pull outside. We close the gate behind us. We parked outside. And actually, we pull outside the gate. We drive up the road maybe 150 yards or so, and there's an empty house there. That's for sale. I had a for sale sign out front. And I'm like, hey, let's go check out that empty house. Maybe whoever closed that gate has some kids or something there. Maybe they're doing some weird stuff. So we go to the empty house, and we look inside the house through the windows. The doors are locked. It's empty. We open up the garage door, and inside the garage is a 2-car garage. And inside the garage are just these piles and piles of trash bags filled with hay. Black trash bags stuffed with hay. I'm like, pretty weird. Never seen that before. So we leave the house. We come back down towards the main gate where those people were, and we're sitting there talking now. We're just trying to make sense of the whole situation, laughing about it, thinking like maybe the footprints are from somebody that was there a long time ago, and the blue rock story is kind of weird. We hear a commotion at that ranch house. A lot of, we could hear her voice, the female voice. She was high pitched.
This is the people that you were at their house before.
Yeah, the original house. Screaming again. I'm like, oh God, here we go again. I said, this time I'm taking them to a detox. I'm like, I'm not going to put up with a bunch of freaking weirdos. So we open up the gate, we drive down there, and they are just hysterical. And I calm them all down. I'm like, what's going on now? I'm getting tired of this crap. And he says, we're sitting in the house. We decided to leave after all. We were going to go back to Albuquerque. We had enough of this crap. And he goes, we were getting ready to pack up our stuff when the electricity went out. And he goes, the house is pitch dark. I can't find my flashlight. And he goes, so we go out to our Jeep, and the Jeep is locked, and the keys are inside the Jeep. And we hear these drums and people chanting all around us. And then he makes fun of the situation. He goes, I know. It's a hallucination. You think we're a bunch of potheads. You're not taking me serious. But I'm telling you, we heard chanting, and the lights were turned off in the house, and the Jeep is locked, and we never locked the Jeep out here. So I go out to the fuse panel outside to the breaker box, and sure enough, the breaker is turned off. And we actually found footprints going up to the breaker. I'm like, okay, so they're messing with you. And he goes, what is going on out here in these mountains? And I'm like, oh, you tell me. And he tells me about this chanting they heard the night before last. They were sitting outside had a little wooden deck on the back. And he goes, we're sitting out there, and we hear this he's to me, he described it sounded like Native American chanting. I'm like, well, I've never heard that out here before, but weird things have happened out here. And he goes, there was a stick person hanging from our tree where the Jeep is parked yesterday morning, and we just thought it was a kid pulling a joke. I'm like, what happened to the sick person? He goes, well, I cut it down. It's laying right below the tree. And I'm like, show me. So we walk over there, and he goes, of course, it's gone. Hallucination. And I said, all right, here's the deal. I'm going to help you unlock your Jeep, and we're going to follow you out. And so we got a coat hanger and fished it through the window, unlocked his Jeep, and they both got in there. And she's continuously apologizing because she goes, look, we're not hallucinating. These things are real. I'm like, all right, I believe you. So we were there maybe half hour. As we're leaving, they lead the way, and my buddy's in front of them. I'm the last one out. They're swerving around a bunch of stuff. I'm like, what the heck are they swerving around? trash bags full of hay everywhere, probably 50 of them. All along the road we came in on, they weren't there when we came in. No footprints, didn't
Wow.
see any people, but just black bags full of hay everywhere. I don't know what the significance behind that was. Whatever, we couldn't make heads or tails of it. We got out the gate, told those guys, good luck going to Albuquerque.
Yeah.
You can pick up your weapons from the sheriff's department the next morning. We locked the gate, or didn't lock the gate. There was no lock. We'd close the gate behind us, and once again we parked next to each other. Like half of this story sounds like there was somebody messing with them.
Right.
Half of the story is the tree people, which we've dealt with all month long in various different areas of the county, sometimes at the same time. We get two tree
That's
people calls
incredible.
60 miles apart in different areas of the county, almost like they talk to each other. And so what's really going on? Is it kids messing with them? Is it really such thing as tree people? Is there some kind of weird cult out there messing with them?
Right.
And to top it off, these guys were using meth and they probably hallucinated a lot of stuff. So that was probably the most interesting tree people call.
That is incredible. Because
And
at the
making it
same
Halloween.
time, you think about it, how could it be one person? Here they bring down a pole, then they're spreading out bags of, it's like, huh?
You have a great point with that pole. That was like an old telephone pole that was probably 30 feet long, and probably they're about 12 inches in diameter. That pole probably weighs 300-400 pounds easy, and there was no drag mark. It's not like they hooked it to a truck or a tractor or something. We don't know how that pole got there. That's one of the things we noted right away. Like, how in the heck did this pole even get here?
Exactly. Exactly. Somebody that wanted to get them out of that house, something they were doing in that area, like, we can't have these two normies
And these people were
sitting.
very sketchy. My intuition, just my body was telling me there's these two people, a husband and wife, and they were probably in their 50s. They were up to no good. And I didn't look into this, but I don't know if they were messing around with a spirit board
Hmm.
or conjuring something or up to some
Right.
weird. I just had this real big feeling like they were up to no good. They were doing something really
And
strange
they
in the
got
house.
away from them, or more, or they got more than what they expected, kind of
Yep.
deal.
Yeah.
That thing about the trees, I had never heard about. That is so interesting. But that, talk about, and when you get a guy that's wanting to cut down a huge tree because he's like, I know it's something in there. This is like,
Yeah.
how can I say it's more than somebody playing a joke kind of
And
deal?
it was so common for a long time, probably, I don't know, I'm guessing probably 6 months, where it happened so much. And it was really strange is because not all that long ago, a couple of years ago, I watched, I don't know if it was a documentary or a movie up in Alaska where people kept seeing owls everywhere. Owls in the
Hmm.
windows, owls in the trees, owls on their car. And it turned out, I think it was a movie because it turned out the owls were actually aliens, but
Right.
you were seeing them as owls. Maybe this was something similar to that.
Right.
Maybe these tree people were something from somewhere else.
Right. That the owls sometimes they did like, basically there was a correlation between owl sightings and UFO or ET sightings.
Mhm.
One of those deals, because you normally don't think of the owl being connected with UFOs or extraterrestrials, but that there was a correlation. That's really interesting. But the thing about the tree people, let me ask you: when you asked them, did it look like a regular person, or was there something that they? What did he
The-
describe that it looked like? Especially the one he hit with a blue rock. That's great.
he just said it looked like it was a man. It was a man wearing camouflage. And like I said, most often in almost all areas, they were always wearing camouflage. But what's the point of all that? And why did we never catch one? Because we were pretty good at catching criminals. I mean, if there was a call of somebody in your house or a
Right.
burglary in progress, most often we would catch them. But these tree people calls always eluded us. So are all these people crazy? And are they all communicating in a county this large, this diverse? Uh, yeah, it was another one of those head scratchers. Like we
Let
don't
me
really
tell
know
you,
what's
when
going
this happened a while back, me and my husband, we were up in Maine. We were on our, we had just crossed into Maine, and we stopped and we stayed in one of these, like, it was like one of these older, 1-story motel kind of deals. It had like little cabins, and it was like in the middle of. So he gets up earlier than I do, and he goes, "You're not gonna believe what I saw." Because he got up like around dawn or something. I think he heard a noise, and he kind of like one of those wig out kind of things.
on.
And when I'm awake, he goes, "You're not gonna believe what I saw." And I go, "What did you see?" He goes, "Heard this noise." And that was the thing. The back of the place, the wood line came up like right up to the back of the motel.
Yeah, yeah.
It was one of those. He goes, I heard something and I didn't know if it was somebody talking. It was like weird. It was, and he says he looked out and he says there's three guys. I can't remember if he said they had pants or shorts, but they had no shirt on and they had deer antlers on and they were walking
Oh,
around in the woods.
great. That's wonderful.
And it
Just
was
what you want
like,
to see.
it's like, what? I just watched them because I'm like, technically, you're not doing anything, but it was like, what if three guys without shirts walking around with deer antlers on their heads, walking around in the woods?
But at least he did something about it and told you. I think sometimes the paranormal or entities can influence your thought process to where you act differently until later on. Then you scratch your head saying, "Oh, why didn't I do this or that?" And that happened to me also several times on the job.
Where you saw something and you were like, "Huh,
I,
do I
I
keep this
was
to myself?"
well, no, this is another weird one. I was meeting the same guy who we used to investigate with. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he worked an hour late. I kept him out an hour longer to finish some reports, and we were like in the between point where I live and he lives. We were making a joke. Let's see who can make it home first. And it's 3 in the morning. Nobody cares. And it was like a race going home. He lived the opposite direction of me, and so it was almost a race. Ready, set, go, and
Uh-huh.
we could hear each other call out on the radio. I'm home 10-7. So I'm hauling butt, and I'm on this little 2-lane road heading towards my house, paved road, and there's a little rise in the road, and it comes back down and goes back up. And as I come over the rise, I see two people standing in the road on the white line, and I swerve to the center of the road because I'm probably doing 90, 100 miles an hour. I swerve to the center of the road, and I slam on the brake, and I turn around and I come back. And as I pull up alongside of them, it's two mannequins, or what appears to be mannequins. It's a male and a female. The male is really tall. I can vividly describe this because it bugs me so much. The male is really tall. He's probably 6'2", 6'3", startling blue eyes. He's wearing coveralls, a white shirt, a baseball cap, and he had a chain draped across, dragging on the ground. It was a big, heavy chain, like a tow chain. It wasn't tied to anything. It was just draped across the shoulders, and you could see the front and the back end just sitting on the ground. Because I'm still thinking this is some kind of weird joke.
Right.
And in his arm, in his elbow, is an old lady. She looked like she was probably 70, 75, pretty old, real short. She's considerably shorter than he is. She's wearing like a period style dress, long dress, little black shoes. She had short white socks on. She had white hair. She had like a veil thing, a scarf on her head. And on her right arm, she was dangling a purse, a blue purse. I'm this far, you can't see me anymore. I'm in the pitch dark here. I'm probably 2 feet away from them because I pulled up alongside of them and I got my spotlight right in their face.
Uh-huh.
And they look completely lifelike. And I thought for a second, like, these are the most realistic mannequins I've ever seen. That is
Right.
really weird. So I turn my spotlight off, roll up my window, turn around, and go home. I'm like, and I'm probably about 3 miles away from the house. I get home, I get out of my unit, I walk in the house, and then it suddenly hits me. I'm like, what in the hell did I just do? I felt stupid because rule of thumb out for us was if you see something weird or get out of your unit for any reason, you notify dispatch. It's as
Right.
simple as saying I was SAM 5. SAM 5, I'm going to be out of my unit. I'm looking at something on the road.
Right.
Always, 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 because you're by yourself and if something happens, at least they
Sure.
know what happened. I didn't do any of that. I rolled up my window and drove home. And the idea of leaving two mannequins standing on the side of the road, to
As
startle
far as
some,
you know, there were
yeah,
mannequins.
to startle some passerby who could wreck and kill because it scared them so bad. Uh, so I got home, I walk in the house, and then it hits me. I think of all these things, and I tell my wife, I'll be right back. And she goes, where are you going? I'm like, never mind. It's just like down the road. I seen something in the road. I'll be right back. I drive back over there. The time that maybe 7, 8 minutes have passed. I get back over there. They're completely gone. I look around. I'm spotlighting the neighborhood, the fields. They're gone. I called dispatch on my cell phone because I didn't want to sound like an idiot on the radio. I'm like, has anybody called in reporting some mannequins or something standing on the road? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, really? I thought I seen some mannequins standing in the road. And he goes, no, I haven't heard anything. Gone. They were gone. And then just that whole night, I kept thinking about it. Those couldn't have been mannequins. They were too real. They were the most lifelike things I've ever seen. They were just frozen in time. It's almost like because I was going so fast, I completely caught him by surprise coming over this hill. Like there was two
Right.
spirits crossing the road, and here I am. So
It's like, hey,
they just froze. That's the only thing I can think of, and it
and the
sounds
way he
bizarre.
was dressed, that's really weird. That's unusual.
And it was the most bizarre thing. I mean, it's just one of the many many stories I have.
And this is what, like you said, like 3 in the morning.
3 in the morning exactly.
I
Yeah,
was like,
3 in the morning exactly.
that
Never
is
happened
spooky.
again.
I bet you the next time you were coming home, you were like, this is
Every time I passed that spot for the next 15 years, I was looking for those guys. you know, they were just it was a one time thing, and it was like it always happens. I guess it's a cliche, but it always happens when you least expect it.
yes,
Same with ghost
yes,
sightings or EVPs.
yes.
I've caught my best EVPs when I was in soliciting for EVP. I just got my
Hmm.
recorder running and something's joining the conversation.
Yes,
You know.
absolutely. You hear that all the time. After people put their equipment away, everything happens.
Yep. Yep.
Uh, and it's almost like they're watching and going, all right, now hit it. So
You're on.
yeah, let me tell you something. That thing with the tree people, and that is, like you said, people that have no connection. That there's not like somebody's telling the other person, "Hey, make a
Yeah.
report or call." And that is so unusual because I don't know if I'm thinking in a tree. I'm thinking peeping tom, somebody trying to look in through a window, maybe. You
Yeah.
know,
It
but
is. It's really weird because it's in law enforcement thing in general all across the country that things happen in threes, and that's another thing that used to puzzle us a lot because we could go a week or two without a death, then have 3 deaths in 2 days. We could go a
right.
week without a domestic violence call and have three in a row that same night.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fact. It always happens in threes. Everything weird.
Right, and then it comes down, and then if you try, and then there's no connection between the
Mm-mm.
incidents in and of themselves,
No, none at all.
just the timing. You know
Yep.
what? I've spoken to people that work in the medical field, and especially in these, either where they have older people, or that death, or maybe or this, hospice or things like that, and they tell me the exact same thing
Yeah.
that they'll have like a spate of deaths, like in threes,
Yep.
and then and they go even people that we didn't think were gonna. Because some of them they'll say, sometimes we could tell when a person looks like they're going to be passing really soon. And then all of a sudden we'll have people pass that we didn't expect
Yep.
that we're
Yep.
going to pass. And they did. They do. So,
Yep.
we got to talk some more. We got to talk some more, Ike. Anyway, I want to thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And if I hope, are you going to start posting stuff on your YouTube channel? And for my
Yes.
podcast listeners, what's the
Yes.
best way to find you?
IDK Paranormal on YouTube.
Okay.
And sometimes I have updates on my TikTok, which is also IDK Paranormal on TikTok.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Easy to
Well,
find
till
out.
next time, I want to wish you the best of luck, and I will be following up with you on your channel, okay?
Okay. Thank you. That was a
Take
great interview.
care.
Great show.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
I could talk to him like all my guests, but no, seriously. I'm sorry for this whiteness. I don't know when I reset my computer that it went south on me. I think it reset the settings on my camera because I have the brightness balanced out, not like it looks like I'm in the and like I've got a headlight. Okay, even if that's my overhead light. Even still, yeah, it's been a great conversation. I don't know about you, but he's got great stories. I'm sure he's got some more because it's true. Sometimes, especially if he's working at nights, and that's incredible. You have to be really brave to work the way he said, where forget there is no backup. By the time the backup arrives, you don't need the backup. All right. You have to be very brave to do law enforcement under those conditions with such a wide area to cover, and or in some cases like that he said, like that you might be cell tower is not working, or your radio, you might be out of radio. I mean, let me tell you, that's you got to be brave to do that because like he said, sometimes you find nothing. And then other times, what sounds like it's a regular call, but when you get there, you find out it's something totally different, like people in a tree. Just saying, there's stuff that's obviously more dangerous, domestic violence calls, um, stuff like that. Everybody hears all the time where some of these calls, by the time the police get there, it's murder, suicide, a hostage situation. Uh, you know, th- there's some people that they're suicidal, but they don't want to do it themselves, so they want to force the hands of the police to kill them. So they do stupid stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm thinking about what he's describing, and he's very brave. Yeah, he's very brave because, uh, when you work in law enforcement in an urban setting where that you could get backup. If it's not your department, you've got some other nearby department who will do a backup on you. That's different. But when you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's like, yeah, sure. And you run into a situation. Um, but see, one thing is when you go out on a call and you kind of have a good heads up of what to expect, but it's different when you go out on a call and either you're told something and it turns out to be something else, or the information that's given maybe to the dispatch unit or whoever called 911, whoever, is something much milder. How's that? Something that didn't sound like it was a big deal. When you get there, if you find out what, so and of course that makes for very, very good. Um, I've spoken to so many law enforcement people and people that do emergency services like paramedics or even firemen, and they all have stories of really weird stuff that it's either happened to them or they've witnessed it. All right, and things that they themselves, it's like, and exactly like what he described. Maybe until recently, you didn't talk about it. Maybe a couple people spoke amongst themselves, but that was it. You did not want to be known as that person. Um, and what's really funny is that a lot of them become, I don't want to say superstitious, but they become, what is this? Sometimes unwilling believers in the paranormal or the afterlife or whatever you want to call it. Just because it's not because they're on a paranormal hunt trying to look for evidence, it kind of like presents itself where there's no denying it. And then all of a sudden they become believers, and they know like there's more to this life than just, you know, that's it, that either that, like some people believe that you die and that's the end of you, or that you die and then you go straight to heaven and there's no in between. And but because of experiences that they've had, they realize there's something that can happen to you between one and the other, you know. And I'm sure everybody's heard of near death experiences, but there's a lot of people in that field that have had same thing. Things follow them home. uh I've heard of officers basically being, I don't want to say visited, but they almost like a uh some criminal that they've had problems with on numerous occasions dies, and basically, I don't want to say comes back for revenge, but comes to basically where they're at. Like, in other words, the prime motivator that you see just in life, which is love, revenge, hate, same thing. Like, this personality can't let it go, and they want to keep the thing going, except that one of them now is dead and the other one's alive. That kind of deal. That false premise that we think that once a person dies, they become enlightened and they understand, that maybe if they were a bad person, that they shouldn't have been that way, or they did bad things, they shouldn't have done it, or it's different. That's not always the case. There's a lot of people that, because they're earthbound, they never, that understanding, that epiphany, if you want to call it that, where you realize, man, I was a bad person, or I did bad things, or whatever. They're not there. They're still who they were when they were alive. Like, as in, And some realize they're dead and others don't. And some, believe it or not, I've run across where one time I had somebody who thought that the afterlife was going to be boring, and they didn't want to go and be good and boring. They wanted to stick around and be here as a ghost, but still have fun and have a better life, because going to heaven was going to be, in their mind, it was like, I'm going to play the harp and it's going to be boring. So there you go. Those are for what they call those Hellraiser kind of personalities. So anyway, guys, I hope you liked the show. Please subscribe to the channel or wherever you find us so you get notified. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, mpellicer.com. You're going to find links to everything, Erie News, Erie.news, whether it's the video links, podcast links. Again, if you want to listen directly from my website, you could listen to podcast versions of any of the shows without commercial interruption. All right, either on the browser or download the MP3 file. And I know for some people, I know personally sometimes, too many commercial interruptions, I have no control over that, depending on what platform is used, airing it. I have no control over that. So that's always an alternative. And let's see, I am going to be doing a live stream for Halloween. And I don't know when this is coming out, but I am going to be doing a live stream with my wingman, with Henry. I don't know what my theme for Halloween is going to be. I don't know if I'll go back to true crime or just weird stuff. Let's see what I can dig up. And I'll be doing a live stream, and I'll have Henry throw in his numerous ghost stories or things that he's heard secondhand, and he's got a bunch of them. He's got some great stories himself. So until next week, thank you so much for being part of my audience, and you are all wonderful. Take care.